Everybody, we're back. Chad Belding with This Life Ain't For Everybody podcast, episode number 6. Today's guest is, he probably does not need any introduction, at least in our immediate area and on the national duck calling and duck hunting scene, fly fishing scene. He hails from the state of Virginia, but he's made his living in the state of Nevada for over the last 30 years. He's the current president of the Canvasback Duck Club, historic duck club down in the Stillwater Marsh of the Fallon, Nevada area. You name it, he's done it. Big game, fly fishing, trips all over the world, waterfowl hunting, including ducks, divers and puddle ducks, geese of the Canada variety, the specklebelly variety, the snow goose variety, as well as swans. So my guest today is none other than Dave Stanley. You guys are going to be amazed with what this guy's accomplished in his outdoor career. He's very humble. He doesn't like me to brag on him, but I do every time I get the chance. When it comes to just presence in the outdoors and the way that he treats the people that he involves himself with in the outdoors, the way he teaches, the way he passes on his knowledge to the next generation, I've never seen anybody better at it. And not to mention, he can absolutely kill the heck out of anything that you put in front of him. So Dave Stanley, he, like I said, he doesn't need any introduction, but he's here today with me. It's taken me 2 months now to get him to come and sit down with me for the podcast because he's so busy. But Dave, thank you for being here. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you for having me.
Dave, just real quick to start off, what's up with the weather right now going on? And I'm hearing it's not just in our area, but what have you seen it like this in the last, how long has it been?
It's been a while. I mean, we had snow day before yesterday, and it's going to be 78 on Sunday or something crazy like that, and it'll snow again. You know, I mean, it's just been it's been a cold, long winter, and it doesn't want to give up. You know.
With all of your years living in the, I call this the Truckee Meadows, the Sierra Valley, the Sierra Mountain Range, is this common to see this kind of a weather pattern, or is this kind of unusual?
It's unusual because if you go back to duck season this year, I mean, November and January were, we never had any weather at all. I mean, it was 65 degrees both of those months, and normally it's freezing and we're hunting in the ice. We did get a little good hunting weather in December and got to shoot some ducks in the ice, but and then we came out of January. February was pretty warm, and then it got cold, and then March we had an amazing March as far as precipitation goes. Tons of snow and rain, and really caught us up for the year because we were way behind.
When you say caught us up for the year, last year we had a record snowfall of like 850 inches, to which, and we'll talk about it more here in a little bit, but the Truckee River was in trouble. Our lakes and our reservoirs were in trouble. Last year's snowpack and snowfall put us back in a position to where it's plentiful now. And if we didn't get that March that we had, which they said was like the third or fourth, largest precipitation in March history or in Nevada history since they started recording that, would we have been in trouble of another drought with the year we had last year, or would it have been, what would have happened?
Well, no, we would have made it through this year, 2018, no problem, just because of the storage and the reservoirs and things like that. Some of the smaller streams, certainly the little mountain creeks and stuff would have suffered, but when you get that big shot of water in March, I mean that's the best water there is because it's there ready to go, and so we're in good shape now, probably for this year and next year. That's the tough thing about where we live in the desert is the high desert is that you have the second largest snowpack in recorded history last year and the largest in some parts of the Sierra. And then, 2 years later, you could be back in a drought cycle just because you can only save so much of it.
And you're used to that because you live in here the last 30 years. You've seen it go in and out of. Sometimes you didn't even have enough water to duck hunt, and other times you had too much and it spread them out. So, I mean. Yeah, several times. I think I moved here in 1979, so almost 40 years now. And it has gone from, I've seen the marsh that we duck hunt in be completely dry for 2 years at a time and to like it was last year, completely full. And where are you going to put the rest of the water? This is going to throw you, and I figured, I know what we're going to talk about today with the state of Nevada and duck hunting and where you hunt and where you travel and where your fishing and hunting career is taking you, the kids you have raised with Katie and John David, the other kids that you have mentored and been an inspiration for their fathers to get them in the outdoors. I just want to start off with just a very weird topic I started thinking about last night, thinking about our podcast, because in your history and in your lifetime, horses were a big part of your life.
Yep.
I want you to talk a little bit about what you did with horses. And where I'm going with this is that I took a drive the other day from Reno to Urington, and I went over the new USA Parkway, and I saw probably 100 to 150 Mustangs. I want you to talk about the. You're a horse lover. You made a living in horses. Your daughter is an equestrian lover. Your whole family has a history in it. What is a wild Mustang? Do they serve a purpose? Are they Are they locals, or are they foreign animals? Give me an idea of all of that, because there's a huge argument. Sure. What are they good for? Are they bad for our wildlands? Talk to me a little bit about your history with horses, and then go and move it into Mustangs.
So I grew up on a horse farm in Virginia, and really when I was 16 or 17, I started working at a fish hatchery because I'd had enough of horses. I mean, literally there was 400 plus horses on the farm when I left, when I was that age. And then I came back to it when I got out of college. I moved to Reno to sell horses with a fellow. We put on public auctions all around the country, and that's what I did for a few years. And during that time, I bought the fly shop, and that became my career. And a few other things happened in there, a couple kids, and met you. Yeah. But anyway, so the horse thing has always been a part of my life. My daughter is crazy about them, and always has been, and and that's a good thing. But when you talk about the wild horses, quote unquote wild horses that live in Nevada, it's a problem. I mean, we live in the driest state in the country. We have half of all the wild horses in the West in that state. Okay, so that's a problem to start with. Secondarily, they're not split-hoofed animals. Think about all of the big ungulates that live out there in the desert. Every one of them has a split hoof. There's a reason for that. They don't tear up the vegetation. Horses, big old clunky foot, and they're very hard on the vegetation. They're very hard on the springs. The BLM is very underfunded in their wild horse program to be able to do something about it. At one point 2 years ago, half of all the wild horses in Nevada were in captivity in one of the many BLM facilities, one of which is 10 miles down the road here. You see it, and so when you're taking care of those things inside of pens, thousands and thousands of them, their wild horse budget gets chewed up pretty fast.
When you say they cause havoc on vegetation in springs and springs, they're a big animal. I mean, a horse weighs a lot of. When it's 95 degrees on a mid-August day, I've seen them laying right in the middle of a spring where I've also seen bighorn sheep and antelope and mule deer drinking out of. When they do that and they put that body weight on them, and do they affect the flow of that natural spring? And do they mess with the water sources obviously they do mess with the food sources for the other wildlife populations. What about those springs though? How do they affect those springs with their body weight and the heat?
Well, one of the things that horses do in general at water sources, they dig with their feet, right? And I've seen springs in drought years where a horse would walk up in front of you, and maybe I'm hunting antelope, so I'm in a little blind on that spring, right? And when a wild horse walks into that spring, it goes out of sight, and it's right in front of you. It's 20 yards in front of you, and it's because they've dug it out so much. And when you get into the smaller water sources, I mean the little seeps and stuff, I've watched horses go in there and they can drain it right then. I mean, it'll fill back up, but they're big animals. They require a lot of water, and you have 10 or 15 of them go into a little spring on the side of the hill someplace, and they can suck it dry pretty fast.
So there is a roundup program where you see
Sure.
wranglers go out and round up these. Is there another option? I don't want to say the word under siege, but there's a lot of wild horses. You said half of the wild horses or Mustangs in the Western United States live in the state of Nevada. Yeah. What can we do is there anything that's being done, or is it just so politically incorrect to want to control these animals that we're at a loss?
It is politically incorrect. I can remember when I was a little kid back in the 60s, seeing the wild horse commercials on TV, Wild Horse Annie and all, and I mean they developed a network where they raise money for these things, and I get it. People love horses, that's fine, but most of them are feral horses, and the ranchers would be the first to tell you that when they have a tough year, they'll turn their horses out on the range and then go collect up the ones they need next spring. It's not necessarily all of them, though. And that's been done over many years. I'm not pointing the finger at today's ranchers. I mean, that's been the case for 100, 150 years. So anyway, that, they are feral horses. It's not the the dreamy notion that every little girl has of this beautiful wild animal with its mane flowing in the wind and everything. I mean, they're in most cases not that great a horse's conformation wise too.
And you come from, like we said before, you come from a family history of raising horses, breeding horses, high grade, like big stock of horses. You and Katie go out to one of these BLM captivity centers, and let's say you adopt one of these Mustangs. Are they easily trainable? Can you train them, or is it just a lost cause to even think about that?
No, it can be done. The problem is the process. If you wanted to adopt a wild horse, they have to come and check your facility. You have to agree to keep the thing. You can't just take it and then 3 months later you decide, this doesn't work. You either have to give it back to them. You can't sell it. You can't, it's very restrictive, the program. And the ones that are, if you get a young horse is a young horse. They don't know any different. You can train them for sure. For sure you can. But so many of the animals in those detention centers, for lack of a better term, are adult animals, and trying to train. The old phrase, you can't teach a dog new tricks. An old dog new tricks is, appropriate there. I mean, it's hard to train old horses.
It is.
Yeah. Not impossible, but hard.
So as a man that hunts wild game, sits on a lot of the different boards for the Department of Wildlife, Game Commission, president of the Canvasback Club, you're a horse lover, but you will be one of the first ones to say that there is an issue and a problem in the state of Nevada with the wild horse.
There's no question. It's a big problem. Yeah.
When you think back on what you've accomplished over just the last, I've known you since 1998, that time frame there. And, it's been 20 years since we've known each other. And you mentioned when you're talking about when you moved to Nevada and you purchased the fly shop, you're a fly fisherman by heart and a duck hunter secondarily and a big game third, or is it all on the same level for you as a person when I talk about fly fishing, waterfowl hunting, big game hunting? Is it in that order, or how does it go?
Well, it goes, to be realistic, what I'm doing at the time is, it all gets my, engine cranking, right? But the reality is I got in the fishing business because as I said earlier, I think I used to work in a fish hatchery in Virginia and for 4 or 5 years. And one of the guys I worked with there told me, man, if you love to hunt, work for the fisheries division. If you love to fish, work for the game division. And so I, at that time, was planning to be a wildlife biologist. And so that's, kind of the way I did it. And I didn't end up being a wildlife biologist. But when I had the opportunity to make the outdoors my business, I chose fishing because it wouldn't conflict with hunting season. And then when you get to hunting season, I love the big game hunt. I mean, the reality in Nevada is it's the only state in the lower 48 you cannot buy a big game tag over the counter. So big game hunting's tough here. You have to put in for a lottery draw every year, and but we have a lot of opportunity, and I've been lucky enough to, harvest animals I would have never dreamed of as a kid in Virginia. Rocky Mountain or California bighorn sheep and desert bighorn sheep and antelope and elk and none of that stuff.
Both archery and rifle, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
And before your dad, who was just an awesome man, he passed away a few years ago. You actually got to share quite a few big game hunts with him as well.
I did when we moved out here, and he and I did a little bit of deer hunting when I was a kid. But my dad, he raised bird dogs. He loved to hunt quail and he loved to hunt ducks. And I never saw my dad hunt over a decoy until I provided the decoys for him to hunt over.
Really?
He was a jump shooter and a good one. But, my earliest memory is him taking me duck hunting with him one day and setting me in a blind and putting this old sweater around me and telling me not to get out of the blind because we're surrounded by water that's over my head. I think I was like 3 years old. And he went off, and I could hear him shoot every now and then. And he came back a couple hours later with a stringer full of ducks and said, all right, let's go home.
Woodies?
Woodies and mallards, yeah.
Virginia?
Yep.
Was Alan with you?
He wasn't born yet.
He wasn't born yet.
Well, he would have been like a year old, though. Yeah.
And Alan, when I say Alan, that's your brother. Alan
Yep.
Stanley, he lives in Delaware now, has Alan Stanley Game Calls, awesome hunting family. When it comes to, and we'll go into this more later, but there was a time when the Stanley family, where there was Alan, you, John David, Bonce, all competing, and Katie. There's been several. Jacob and Bonds.
6 of us, I think, at one time.
Six of us in the World Duck competition in Stuttgart.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the pictures. And Alan's had quite a bit of success. Nobody touches JD's success with 7 top 10 finishes at Stuttgart in the World Duck Calling Championship. But you talk about a calling family. We'll get to that in a minute. But the big game part of it, you're going into that. So you got the fishing and the big game. And
so the fishing became my job and, my career really, but I still love to fish. I mean, I went last night, you don't get over that. The big game hunting, I kind of got into it more when I got out here, but my, nothing is as much fun as watching ducks come into the decoys. It's just nothing better than
just
that.
Hearing you say that and seeing the look on your face across this table right now. And I don't mean to sound cliche, but you get goosebumps. Like just thinking about when we laying in those blinds in Alberta 2 years ago, and me and you're just giggling with mallards landing all around us. I mean, it's just, and that's where I was going with my question is that, and I talked to Rock Merlot about this same thing, is he loves to fly fish. And there's a certain amount of solitude in fly fishing where there's the loneliness of it. There's the time to think and recharge your batteries. But duck hunting isn't like that. It can be, but duck hunting's no more as the camaraderie and the cutting up and the blind. You don't have to be quiet all the time. You can cook. They can't smell you. That's what I love about the sport. But then you can go get your fly rod and go on a small creek or a river or out to a big body of water like Pyramid Lake and stand on a ladder by yourself for 4 hours and just sit there and be one with yourself. Is that kind of what you get out of it? Like there's a balance there, right?
There is. And like last night, I said I went fishing. I went to Pyramid, which is right out by where we both live. And it was one of those amazing nights where a storm came in and it rained a little bit. And then there were rainbows and the sun's coming through the clouds and the pyramid was all lit up and, just all the stuff you see out there when you go out there regularly. And it's beautiful. And yeah, the fly fishing part of it for me, or the fishing part of it in general, is more, particularly trout fishing is more restorative. You just go out and it's kind of a good place to recharge your battery and think about stuff that's on your mind and whatever. And it's quiet, like you say.
Thinking back when I was, maybe the mid 80s, late 80s, there was a show on TV called Fish in the West. And I remember the episodes and I'd watch it every week and they would do episodes out at Pyramid. To this day, 2018, it's been it's been 30 years since then. Why does that lake work? Why is it such a destination? You can go out there at times and the entire shoreline is lined with shore fishermen, ladders with fly fishermen, boats all over the place with trolling and that going on. Why does it work and why has it become such a phenomenon when it comes to, and I assume it's the cutthroat trout?
It is. And the, the biggest cutthroat trout in the world are caught in Pyramid Lake every year,
Are there other,
with rare exceptions.
Sorry to interrupt, but are there other places that have cutthroat trout, or is this the only?
Oh, sure.
There are.
Yeah, and the species that's here, the Lahontan cutthroat trout, which was part of the Lahontan Sea, which covered the Great Basin, part of the United States for, millennia. That they are scattered elsewhere as well, but for whatever reason, the makeup of Pyramid Lake is where they do the best, and up until, I moved here in 79, up until like 2007, I think. Yeah, 2007. The fishing at the lake would be good. It would be bad. It would be good, bad, whatever. A big fish was 15 or 16 pounds, which is a huge trout, don't get me wrong. And then the tribe hired some geneticists to go around the state to the different watersheds and find the closest genetic match to the fish that used to be in Pyramid Lake, because they took scale samples from the world record. The largest cutthroat trout ever caught on rod and reel was caught in Pyramid, like 41 pounds or something ridiculous. But they took a scale off of that fish, so they have the genetic code, right? So anyway, they go around and look, and they found them in a little creek called Pilot Peak Creek, which is on a mountain right on the Utah-Nevada border. The biggest fish in that creek's probably 11 or 12 inches long. But they brought them back to Pyramid Lake with the help of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They raised them in a hatchery. They released them in the lake. They clipped them and marked them so that the Pilot Peak fish were separate from the fish that are currently in there, which were the Summit Lake fish. And, in 7 years, those fish were 20 pounds. I mean, that's crazy growth for any freshwater fish, but particularly for trout. And so, The popularity of it is there's not many places you can go with little skill or knowledge of the water and stand out there, huck it out in the lake, and have a chance to get your fly in front of fish that size and catch them.
Is Pyramid a freshwater body of water?
Yeah, it is, but it's real alkaline water, But yeah, it's where the Truckee River ends. The river that drains Lake Tahoe flows, out of the Sierra through Reno, out into the desert, and dumps into Pyramid Lake, and it's a true desert reservoir in that there's an inflow but no outflow. So evaporation takes it down in the summer and fall, and runoff brings it back up in the spring and summer.
So if God calls your cell phone and says, "Dave, I know you're going fishing at Pyramid tomorrow. What do you want the weather to be like?" What do you tell God?
I want about a 15-mile-an-hour breeze, cloudy, and about 45 air temperature. Water temperature a little warmer than that, not much, 46 or 7 degrees, and good chop on the water. And those fish, they don't like sunlight because they live in deep water most of the year. They live down in 80 to 120 feet of water, but they come into the shallows both to feed and as the water cools off in the winter. And then by springtime, late February, March is when they spawn in April. And so they come in the shallows to do that. They try to go up the Truckee River, or they have an artificial spawning stream there in the town of Sutcliffe that the fish actually come back to. And so, that's what gets them in the shallows where we can fish for them with a fly rod.
15-mile-an-hour wind, you can cast in that?
Yeah.
Really?
Have to be blowing right in your face, but yeah, you just want the chop. Then they're comfortable in that shallow water. You see them cruising by. Last night you could see fish.
When you say shallow, how deep you talking?
Well, I mean, you're wading out there and then standing up on your little 3 or 4 step kitchen ladder, so you're only in water that's 3 feet, 3.5 feet deep. You're probably looking in front of you. It's maybe 4 or 5 feet deep, but yeah, they're just cruising along.
So then, where you're fishing out there? Are there cliffs and it drops off?
Yeah.
The natural lay of that land would be like canyons underneath that water.
It's like stair steps. It goes down a little because it's all sand. So the storms change it frequently. Where the drop off is and how steep it is and everything. But it'll go out in front of you and then drop off 3 or 4 feet and make a shelf or like a step really. And then those fish find those edges, the shelves, and they'll just follow them. They'll swim around the lake along those shelves, looking for food, and at this time of year, getting ready to spawn.
So you get the weather that you want out there, and then I know you have an awesome arsenal because you know your way around. But what works out there on that weather day you just described? What are you? Dry fly, nymphs? What works at Pyramid Lake?
There's 2 basic ways they fish it now. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can fish it, but the 2 most popular ways are you fish with a floating line and an indicator or a bobber, right? And then you hang a couple of weighted midges underneath that are probably size 10 or 12 flies. And, you get a little chop so that indicator's, floating up and down as the waves come by. And so it's jigging your flies underneath there. They're jigging up and down. And you can put it right on the shelf where the fish are cruising. And that's the most effective way to catch them. You're going to catch more fish doing that than most any other way you fish. And then the other way to fish is the historic way we've fished it forever, which is with a fast sinking line. Shooting head, whatever, and you just chuck it out there as far as you can with a couple of, woolly worms or flies with foam on them, so they'll float up off the bottom a little, and then you just strip it back in across that sandy bottom and intercept the fish that are cruising.
Is that a totally different approach or application of fly fishing than the Truckee River would be?
Oh yeah, completely different. Because you're dealing with moving water versus sedentary water in a lake. You can see the fish much easier at Pyramid than you can see them in the river. And you pretty much know what the depth is. It's not going to change. Like you move 20 feet up or downstream, and you may have to be moving your indicator and doing all because of the depth changes. So at Pyramid, it's pretty. You're in a spot, you get it set up right, then you don't have to do anything.
Before you mentioned the Truckee River is the river that takes the water out of Lake Tahoe, comes down through the Truckee Meadows, through the city of Reno, out through the Eastern Canyon or the Interstate 80 Canyon, and then down through, Wadsworth and Nixon, Nevada on the reservation into Pyramid Lake. Explain the Truckee right before Tahoe, and then where is that a good fishing water? Is the Truckee a good fishing water? And then there's also the Little Truckee, right?
Sure. The Truckee is a really good stream. It's difficult because it doesn't, like the big name streams in the western United States, it doesn't have thousands of fish per mile like the Green River or the Bighorn or whatever, but it has plenty of fish per mile, and it's from Lake Tahoe down to the town of Truckee is kind of one stretch of it that is it's fairly good fishing up there. I think from Truckee down to Reno is certainly encompasses the best fishing, and that's 40 miles of river anyway, which is plenty of water to get everybody out on and get them spread out. And then once you get from Reno going downstream, there's been a huge restoration effort on the river, the 20 miles downstream of Reno by the Nature Conservancy, and partnered with the Department of Wildlife and local businesses and whatever. But they've made a huge impact. I mean, in the 80s and early 90s, when I had the fly shop, when I first had the fly shop, no one fished down there ever. I mean, it was just it was trash, it was crappy water quality, all this stuff, and it has been cleaned up. The trout habitat has been restored. The river's much cleaner down there now too, and it's a growing fishery. The one downside to the river below Reno is that when we do have drought conditions, the river's pretty flat down there, and it warms up really fast when that water gets low. So we lost most of the fish population there 2 years ago when we had the worst part of the drought, but it'll come back.
And on a big water year like last year, and then this March that we had, the Truckee's almost out of its banks, and in some places, does that make for tough fishing with the quality of water and the mugginess, and so it can hurt you with that much water too?
Sure. Oh yeah, but at some point in June or July, the water's going to go down. There's not an endless supply of it up there, right? They're going to get the reservoirs to the point where they go, okay, this is what we're going to save for next year, and I mean, they don't turn it off, but they lower the flow considerably at that point. But yeah, this time of year, there's the fishing is better the farther up you go because the water's clearer. As you get farther and farther down the Truckee River Canyon and more streams flow in, and particularly now, days like today, it's going to be 70 and all the snow's melting, and that just comes in, without any control at all. The river gets pretty muddy down here in Reno, whereas in Truckee it may still be really nice and not clear, but that beautiful green tint it gets this time of year, and that's what you want for fishing.
Is right now the right time to book a trip with you, Truckee River Outfitters, and I've been on the floating the river in that part, from Truckee down to the city of Reno. Would you tell a guy that called you right now, let's wait a little bit, or would you take him right now?
I'd say let's wait a little bit. Myself, personally, for the kind of fishing I like to do, the guys that I guide with are doing well up on the upper river, up around the town of Truckee right now. When you get big water, the fish are just like people. They don't want to be out there in that super fast current, so they move towards the banks, and so they're where you can get to them. It just takes a little stealth and some persistence, but the fishing's pretty good now. I typically enjoy June, late May, June, and July are my favorite times to fish the river. And then again in October, but now I'm in Canada in October, so I don't get to do that too much.
Oh, poor guy. With my little, time being around a fly rod, and I love it. I mean, and the reason I love it is because, and you taught me this a while ago, and I've heard other people talk about it, is that it truly is hunting a fish. It's not like going to a little body of water and throwing a worm out there, some power bait, and just hoping that something swims by and it gets its attention. I mean, talk to me about what matching the hatch means. Cause to me, that's the coolest term in like hunting and fishing is like, you go out there and you see the hatch comes off of bugs. Talk to me let's just use our body of water here locally, the Truckee. I know other ones vary, but what are those bugs and what are you trying to match?
So when you see them, the bugs are, as you say, they're hatching. They're coming off. The fish are rising, eating them, whatever. In the Truckee, most times they're going to be caddisflies, which is a type of aquatic insect that we have a lot of in the Sierra. They may be stoneflies. They may be mayflies. But what you're doing as far as matching the hatch goes is, you catch the bugs, look at them, and I think in order, if I catch a bug, if I go to some place I've never fished before and the bugs are hatching. I catch a couple bugs, look at them. I'm looking at the things I'm looking at when I look in my fly box to match them. I'm looking at the size, and the silhouette is the most important thing. Color being way farther down the road than that, okay? And then you got to look at how the bugs are on the water. If they're just floating completely dead drift at the mercy of the current, or if they're running across the water or whatever, you gotta imitate the bug like the fish wants to see it, right, or is used to seeing it. So you do that. Um, there's lots of times you'll go up to water where the fish aren't, or the bugs aren't hatching and the fish aren't actively rising, so you can't see where the fish are. Then, you flip over a few rocks, look at the bugs under there, kind of get an idea of which ones are most populous, in that part of the stream. And then again, look in your box and silhouette, size, color, and then get the fly down, if in that case you need to get those nymphs, right on or near the bottom to catch fish on them. So,
Two-part question. You look in your fly box and you don't have one. Would you still to this day, or I know there was a time when you'd go home that night and put your little glasses on and turn the light on and start tying, right? And that's what you were doing. You were matching the hatch, and then you'd be like, this is what I need. You envision it, and then what happens? Like, you go and get feathers off of wild animals, you buy them. How does that work?
Yeah, and obviously over the years I have a stash of that stuff, but easily my favorite fly tying materials are the ones I've collected, in the wild, whether they be wood duck flank feathers, which are a really cool fly tying material, or Hungarian partridge skins or whatever. There's a lot of fur and feathers I get to use from animals that I had a great time harvesting, so I get to use them again,
Have you ever tied an elk hair caddis with one of the elk you've harvested?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And what part of is there a certain part of that? Is it up by the mane, or is it in his throat, or what's the best part of that elk hide to use?
Typically it's along the back, where you would put a saddle on it if it was that kind of animal, right? Because that's the longest hair, the most exposed part of their body. And and it has, really fine tips that work well for tying dry flies. So yeah, that's where you get it.
And the second part of that question, Dave, was what is your definition of a nymph? NYMPH is what we're saying, right?
Yeah.
What is the definition or your definition of a nymph?
It's the subsurface form of an insect, that's really what it is. All these aquatic insects, they start out as an egg, and the egg hatches, and they hatch into little nymphs. Or not all the aquatic insects, but the ones that have actual nymphs, they hatch into a nymph. They're microscopic, and some of them grow to 2 or 3 inches long before they hatch, and others go through a different kind of metamorphosis. They're actually larvae and pupa and that kind of thing. But basically, it's the subsurface form of aquatic insects.
So I walk in as a customer to your shop, and you're standing there. Can I help you? Are the two things that I ask for typically are a nymph or a dry fly? Or how does that, is the opposite of a nymph when it comes to fly fishing considered a dry fly?
Yeah, I think in most people's experience that's true, right? Okay. You're either going to fish with the subsurface form of that bug or the floating form of that bug. And then there's other things like crayfish, like little fish, minnows, that you can imitate with flies. And you can imitate grasshoppers, whatever. They're not non-aquatic insects, obviously, ants and grasshoppers and beetles and things like that. But yeah, typically most people's experience of fly fishing is you're either nymph fishing or you're dry fly fishing.
And if you're nymph fishing and you have it that you're down on the waters, the rocks and the rock beds and how the stream flows, is that fish biting it because he's hungry, he's pissed off? Is he feeling vibrations? Is he seeing it? Or how does a trout in a river system like the Truckee or the Bighorn or the Green or wherever, or the Deschutes in Oregon, why are they biting that fly?
It's a visual thing. They're down, let's say you're nymph fishing right along the bottom, and the fish are laying on the bottom, which they do for long periods of the day, particularly when the sun's up high. They don't want to be up in the water column where the sun's on them, and thereby the birds and other things can, attack them. But the fish are laying on the bottom. They see stuff float by all the time. I've checked many a stomach samples of trout to see what they do eat, and you'll find little twigs, you'll find little pieces of leaves, you'll find chunks of moss, along with all of the bugs in there. And so whatever it was about that thing as it was drifting by, it made that fish think, yep, that's the real deal, and they go and eat it. And their mouth is like our hands, where we reach out and grab a hamburger that's floating by and eat it. They grab it with their mouth, they realize it's not what they thought it was, and they spit it out way faster than it just took me to say that too. They suck that fly in there and boom, back out it goes. So that's why nymph fishing is a tough skill to learn, because you can't see it all happening. it's happening, and then you see the effects of it, and you have to react to the effects before, the fish.
So your reflex has got to be dead on. I mean,
Yeah.
if he puts it in his mouth and
Yeah.
and you're saying he can spit it out that fast, you got to be on your A game, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, occasionally they'll just hook themselves because it's in fast water or whatever. But yeah, if you want to be good at it, you got to be fast.
Is
Yeah.
catch and release the best thing that's ever happened in your mind as the fishing population of the country? I know that people want to fish and we
Sure.
catch fish and we eat fish.
Yeah.
But when it comes to streams like the Truckee, it seems like the catch and release mentality and ideology has created these fisheries now that they're not just rivers anymore; they're actual fisheries.
Right.
Is the catch and release program or ideology a big part of that?
It is, and it's not, it's not for everywhere. There's parts of the Truckee River that get stocked with thousands of fish each year, during the summertime for all of those thousands of license holders to go out and catch fish and have a good experience, and that's fine. I mean, those are the fish you want to take. You want to keep those fish. If you're of the mind to keep fish. If you go up in the canyon let's use the Truckee for the example, in the canyon between here and Truckee, the river hasn't been stocked there forever, in a long, long, long time. I mean, longer than the 40 years I've lived here. Okay. And so you're dealing with a self-sustaining population of fish. It's a good idea to turn them loose, And it was really easy for us. I mean, in the fly fishing business, I had the shop for 30 years and I still run my guide service that was originally started with the shop. They're my business partners, man. I don't want to be killing those things. I want to come catch them again tomorrow with you.
Right.
So that's the way I look at it. But there are certainly places and times when keeping fish doesn't harm the fish population, and it's perfectly okay to do that.
What is the percentage of the fly fishermen that in your career that believe in the catch and release as the mainstay of their fishing day?
I think, when people get into fly fishing, that just becomes a part of it. Now, fly fishermen can be too militant about the catch and release thing too. You got to remember, we were all kids with a red and white bobber at one point. You can get saved and born again, but the reality is we all started fishing the same way. So it's most fly fishermen practice catch and release in some place or another during their career as a fly fisherman. A lot of places you have to now. I mean, there's no choice. It's a no-kill river. So when you fish there, you have to let all the fish go, and you fish with barbless hooks, and you use a net and do the things responsibly to let a fish go, so you don't damage it while you're borrowing it for a few minutes having fun. You want to let it go in as good a shape as you caught it in.
And then fishing for you doesn't end there. You got freshwater bodies and lakes like Pyramid. You got the Truckee River system. I know you fished Bighorn and all over Montana, Wyoming, Oregon, Idaho, Western United States, as well as, there's people don't know this, and I don't know it from experience, but I've heard that there's several river systems in the state of Arkansas that are trout, trophy trout destinations, right?
There are. The white and the little red are phenomenal trout fisheries, man-made too.
What kind of trout? Rainbow?
Rainbow and brown trout, both. The largest, I think, the world record brown trout was just beaten, but it was caught on the Little Red, and I don't know, 20 years. For 20 years, it was the largest one caught in the U.S., or I guess in the world. It was 42 or 3 pounds, and I think a river in Michigan they caught one a little bigger than that, not too long ago, 3 or 4 years ago. But yeah, they're huge fish down there.
And it doesn't stop there for you either. Now we go into saltwater fly fishing. You've been all over southern Mexico, Florida, Bahamas, You fished everywhere. Is that a completely different style of fly fishing and application?
Yeah, and most of that, except for the blue water stuff, which is different in itself, but the shallow water flats fishing that you do, saltwater fishing, it's hunting and fishing combined. I mean, you're not just hucking a fly out there and stripping it back and hoping a fish encounters it right. You're actually cruising, either poling along the flats in a boat or wading the flats, looking for the fish. You spot the fish, then you cast to them. And it's kind of the ultimate, combination of hunting and fishing for a guy like me who likes to do both, and I can let the fish go, so.
Is that a tarpon?
Bonefish, tarpon, permit, all kinds.
Is tarpon the hardest fish in the world to catch on a fly rod?
I don't know. It's not the hardest. It might be the most fun. Actually, 10 days from now, I'm going to take Katie for the first time. She's never been tarpon fishing. We're going to the Keys, and she's going to fish with me for a few days, and then her brother John David's going to come down, and she's going to come back home and go to work, and we're going to fish for a few more days. Neither one of them have been able to do it.
Tom, can you go check the mailbox to see if our invitations are in there?
I'm sure they are.
For the Florida deal.
So we're going to go do that, and it's fun to do it as a family, obviously, and to get to see them do it for the first time. But yeah, it's a completely different deal than freshwater fishing, partially because of the size and the strength of the fish, more the strength than anything. I mean, a little 3 or 4 pound bonefish could drag a 10-pound trout around backwards all day long. I mean, they just live in a more, it's a survival of the fittest environment, and they got to be fast to survive.
I've heard that sometimes like casting can be 100, 120 feet for tarpon. I mean, is that common, or can you?
No, it's not. Most of the fish you're going to catch, flats fishing, you're going to catch 20 to 50 feet from the boat, which, you can, I've taught a lot of people to fly cast over the years, and you can get a guy casting 50 feet of line pretty easily, Now then you add wind to that, and, they're excited and all that, and things, the wheels fall off every now and then, but it's not a deal where, the top 2% of the casters in the world can do it well, and then everybody else just struggles at it. That's not the deal. You can definitely get close enough that the average guy can catch them.
Average guy with the right equipment, I assume.
Yeah. I mean, but in saltwater, one of the cool things about saltwater, particularly saltwater destinations in the United States, is these guides have figured it out that most of the people they're taking fishing are trout fishermen. So they don't have the gear, right? So they got to go out and spend all this money to go on a 3-day trip or a week-long trip. Well, in the U.S. in particular, most of the guys provide the equipment now. I mean, if you have your own, take your own, because you're used to using your stuff. But if you don't have that and don't want to necessarily make the investment in it, almost every saltwater destination I can think of, the guides provide the gear if you want it.
So in Florida, where you're going to the Keys, 3 questions in the 3 bodies of water we talked about so far. What weight rod are you going to hand me in the Keys for a tarpon or a bonefish?
Tarpon is going to be on the high end of the scale. It's going to be a 10 or an 11 weight there in the Keys. Bonefish, 8 or 9 weight.
Pyramid Lake?
Pyramid Lake, I use a 6 weight most of the time, but 7 weight's probably a more common rod to be used out there.
In a river system like the Truckee?
4s and 5 weights,
And what is a average fish that you're going to catch in a with a 4 and a 5 pound rod? You're looking to catch a 2-foot, 24-inch trout in the river, most of them 18 inches. What can you expect when you go on a day on the river?
A 4 or 5 weight rod.
Yeah.
The average fish on the Truckee are going to be somewhere between 11 and 14 inches. Since the drought, the effects of the severe drought we had 2, 3, and 4 years ago, you catch a few more smaller fish now because they make up a bigger percentage of the population, because we lost some fish for sure in the river. But the fishing is coming back well, and typically the average fish you're going to catch in the Truckee are going to be somewhere 11 to 14 inches. And then there's fish, it's not uncommon to catch them up to 18 inches, and then they're way bigger than that. I mean, the biggest fish I've ever seen in the river, caught in the river, was like 15 and a half pounds. So
You see a picture up there?
I do. That was a big one.
Does that spark a memory?
It does. We were floating the river together, and at the time, that was the biggest fish I'd ever had a customer or a friend, whatever. That was the biggest fish I'd ever had customer land, and it's a picture for those of you. Obviously, you can't see it. It's a big rainbow trout that Chad caught on floating the Truckee River with me one day, and it's probably 27 inches long or something. Big, huge fish.
I still talk mad smack to Wade, who was with us, because he just couldn't believe it. So what we started with was, obviously the fly fishing. Just tomorrow's your last day to ever get to cast a fly rod. Where is it going to be?
I'm going to be by myself. It's going to be someplace really beautiful, like a little spring creek, outside of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, or there's a couple of places up in the Sierra I would do it, but it would be, I would want it to be beautiful more than anything. That would be more important than however good or bad the fishing was, yeah, that would be it for me.
And transitioning into, the other huge aspect of your outdoor life, is there fishing in the Stillwater? Don't you guys fly fish for carp out there sometimes?
Yeah.
Is that the same kind of approach as like Pyramid would be on that body of water like that? Or is that more visual? You spot them and cast to
It's
them?
exactly what you do fishing the saltwater flats because you're looking for the fish. You can't just blind cast in that murky, nasty water that's out there in the duck marsh. So you have to go find the fish, and then you're casting fairly small flies, trying to get them in as close to them as you can because the water is murky, and the fly's got to be close to that fish. And carp are hypersensitive, much harder to catch than trout, in my opinion. But way fun to catch, and they're also quite a bit bigger than your average trout. I mean, it's in the lower Truckee and the lower Carson River and Stillwater Marsh. I mean, it's not uncommon to catch a 15 or 20 pound trout on a fly rod. So,
Or you mean a carp?
I mean carp. Sorry, yeah.
What is
Definitely not a trout?
what is the purpose of a carp?
They're well, first of all, they're non-native to North America. They were brought here to clean up vegetation in ponds, or that was mainly what they were brought here for. And they serve a purpose. I mean, they're part of the aquatic environment is the bottom. They're hoovering up stuff on the bottom. That's where they eat, where they feed most of the time. And so because of that, when we fish for them, we catch them with crayfish in the Truckee River because they eat a lot of crayfish. We catch them with crayfish patterns and then nymphs, small nymphs.
Are they bad for a trout population?
Anything is bad in too big of numbers. Like in the lower river, no, they're not. There's a lot of them down there, but there's a lot of river, and so the trout and the carp coexist. I've seen places where there were too many carp. Out at the Duck Club's a great example. The carp get out there, and after you've had 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 good years of water, they muddy up the water so bad that it's difficult for other fish to compete, survive, to feed and do all the things they need to do. And it's tough on the ducks too because that muddy water doesn't grow nearly the amount of food that a little bit clearer water grows. So, in moderation they're good, but yeah, you don't want too many of them.
So they're kind of the wild horse of the fishery.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny how that tied in.
Yeah.
But you heard me say the word, and it is one word, Stillwater.
Uh-huh.
Stillwater National Wildlife Refuge, and it's at the Stillwater Basin, correct? The Stillwater Mountain Range. Mm-hmm. What is it? Is it an oasis? What is it? Because it's like desert, and then all of a sudden, beautiful duck country. Talk to me a little bit because you've been out there for years, and then we'll go more into what you do out there with the club and your association with that part of the country. But what is Stillwater?
Stillwater, well, it's the first place I duck hunted when I moved to Nevada, and because people told me, yeah, there's this wildlife refuge out there, you got to go check it out. So I did. It is it's at the natural end of the Carson River. So the Stillwater Marsh, or the Carson Sink, as it's also known, is the river flows out there, and it fills up in the winter and spring and evaporates down in the summer and fall, much the same as Pyramid Lake we were talking about earlier, except it's a whole lot shallower. Pyramid Lake's 380 feet deep. The Stillwater Marsh is 4 feet deep. So, but anyway, that water flows out there. Tules, bulrush, all that stuff grow. Sago, smartweed, and a dozen other different kinds of waterfowl feed are out there and present when we have water. Phenomenal shorebird population this time of year and in the fall too. It's a major migratory stopover for shorebirds as well as waterfowl. The marsh itself, the refuge itself, I should say, the refuge started in 1948. The Duck Club that I belong to started in the 1920s. So it predated the refuge by 25 years at least, and people were hunting there since the turn of that century, in the 1890s and 1900s. Anyway, the refuge, over the years after it started in 1948, has bought all of the land around the club. So the club's an island in the middle of the refuge now. And a great deal of the refuge is public hunting. It's not like it's all closed or anything. There's a closed zone that has about 5,000 acres of wetlands in it, and then depending on the water year, the open area may have 1,000 acres of water. It may have 15,000 acres of water. Like last year would have been an example on the higher end for sure, and this year will be too, I believe. And so it's this big, huge area. It's not run like the refuges. A lot of the refuges, certainly in California and places where closer to bigger population centers, you can go out there anytime during the waterfowl season, go hunting. There's no check-in, no check-out. They don't limit the number of hunters. And that's usually doesn't matter because there aren't that many. It's out in the middle of nowhere. But it's a really unique marsh in that where you'll sit over here on the edge in the tule ponds and stuff and shoot cinnamon teal and green-winged teal and gadwall and widgeon and mallards and pintails and all the ducks that people who hunt puddle ducks grow up shooting. And then right outside of those tules in a big open sheet water, there'll be canvasbacks and redheads and scaup and ringnecks and whatever. And so there's a great diversity of waterfowl there. We're lucky enough to be able to. Nevada's one of the 3 states in the West where you can hunt swans. We can buy permits for 2 of them a year now, and that's a huge opportunity and a really fun thing to do. You and I've done that together a number of times. And
any idea how many come to that part of the Stillwaters? Do they come from Utah? Do they leave the Salt Lake? Is that their first stop after
the Bear River? Which is just above the Salt Lake. Yeah, and they come from they almost all of them. When you see the migratory corridors of these things, and they've radio collared them, we've done that. We've helped them do that at the club for a number of years. Put the first radio collars they put on swans in the West there, and what they found was there's something about Freeze Out Lake, Montana that swans. I mean, almost all of the swans that come here go through there. There's some that come right down the Pacific coast and into California, which don't actually come here. But most of ours, they go to Freeze Out Lake, Montana. They go to the Bear River, which is at the north end of the Great Salt Lake. And then they come to the Stillwater Marsh. And then they go over to what we know is, Marysville, Sacramento Valley, that area, where, they spend the rest of the winter.
Why can you not hunt them there? Because when I drive through that, where you just said Marysville and up towards all over Gridley and all the rice checks are just, you could walk across them.
Yeah. It's a social issue in California that they feel like pushing for a swan hunt is probably going to create more problems than good. Although I did hear that a group of hunters were going to petition the Department of Wildlife in California to instigate a swan season, because I believe the feds are totally in favor of it. I mean, there's a population there; it's huge and it's huntable on a restricted basis, and so anyway. But it's a unique thing, and oddly enough, where I come from in Virginia and North Carolina is the other place you can hunt swans in the country, and there's really good hunting in North Carolina, some marginal hunting in Virginia, but
are they tundra swans over there too?
Yeah, both are tundras. Nevada, we can only hunt them in 3 counties because the eastern part of the state, we do have trumpeter swans that migrate through in some numbers, and so you don't want to be intentionally shooting trumpeter swans. There have been a few killed over the 30-some years that the swan season's been here, but it's statistically an incredibly small number of the total swans harvested. So
as many times as you've made that drive out there through, leaving Reno through the town of Fallon, and you hit Stillwater Road and you're headed to what, you've mentioned the Duck Club, the Canvasback Gun Club, is the feeling the same still? Kid in a candy store, Christmas Eve, getting ready to open up presents with your family more? Does it still do it for you?
It does. It's funny. I went out there the other day, and we're doing this in April now, so obviously hunting season's long gone, and hit that gravel road, and my dog starts whining. That's her. I mean, she can obviously smell it and everything, but she knows then where we're going then, and I'm the same way. It's just like, yeah, this is great. This is where I want to be hanging out. That's passion. You have it, and I have it, and lots of people have it, and it's what you live for.
And with that passion, I mean, just when you make that left turn off of the dirt road and you see the green sign, it says Stillwater Farms, and you got the corrals there. That's when getting into hunting in the late 1990s, into waterfowl hunting, and meeting you and John David, I got to go out to the public area a little bit, and then was lucky enough to get invited to you. And that place is just different. I mean, with what I do now, I get to travel all across the, Canada and America and different countries and visit a lot of different duck hunting destinations per se. And as far as a gun club goes, there's not a lot of them. Like you can go, there's gun clubs and high dollar clubs, and the Butte Sink has a lot of cool gun clubs, but the Canvasback is like, it's more of a community, like a little town.
Right.
It's a little city, and it's got it's got the meeting hall, and it's got the feed hall, and it's got all these different houses and trailers, and some of them are real nice, and some of them have been there since
1930.
1930. So, and then the road signs, Spoonbill Lane and Mallard, and then you have the dog cemetery and the pet cemetery. That place is just, I mean, you've seen it evolve. Is it a community out there? I mean, are you guys? I mean, I know that most of the members. How many members are there? What does it take to be a member, and what is the community like?
There's about 115 members, which sounds like a lot, but there's 115 members probably in the club right now, and we have a little over 6,000 acres that we own, like 10 square miles, 6,400 acres. A little bit less than half of that's wetlands, and so we've got a big play area there. It's a phenomenal marsh and a phenomenal group of guys. The sense of family out there is big. They're fun people. I mean, you look forward to seeing them every Saturday morning when you get up 2 hours before shooting time to draw your pill and then draw your blind and go out hunting, and it's like I say, it's a great group of people, and we're so lucky to have a place like that that's this close to where we live. I mean, it takes me an hour and 30 minutes to get there from my house.
Is it duck and goose hunting?
Yeah, but Stillwater has okay goose hunting. It can be phenomenal at times, but we just don't have the large numbers of birds that are going to stay and come through. It's the birds that come there stay, but that's part of the problem is they get used to the program, and then they're very hard to hunt unless you get the right weather. Whereas if you hunt geese in other parts of the country, like I know you've hunted a bunch in Kansas and North Texas, places like that, you have new birds coming. It's a major migratory corridor. The eastern side of the Sierra isn't. We get probably in a good year 250 or 300,000 ducks that come through, and way less than that. I mean, 10 or 15,000 geese, something like that.
Canadas.
Yeah, mostly Canadas. We see, as most of the West does now, you see more and more speckled bellies. There's still not a huge population or anything, but we do see some now. And then Ross's geese hang out with the Canadas for whatever reason. It's kind of weird. And then in the spring, the snow goose hunting. Now that we have a spring season, while we don't see them in those numbers going through in the fall, for whatever reason, when the snow geese pile up and come back, start heading back north, a lot of them end up in the Fallon area, just because I don't know why. That's what they do.
And as the president, you lead a board, and you have things that you vote on, and there's work days, and there's kids camps and green wing days, and there's so much stuff that's happened at the club. You're favored, right? You get to hunt wherever you want every day of the club. That's not how it works, right? First of all, you hunt Wednesdays, Saturdays, Sundays, and some holidays, correct?
Just one holiday now, yeah. So Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday, and New Year's Day.
New Year's Day, that's what it is now.
Uh-huh.
You wake up in the morning, and there's a certain time that every member has to be at the city hall to do what you call the draw, and you've already mentioned the pill. So you get up there and you spin the barrel, and then what happens? Every guy gets in a line and picks a pill.
Everybody walks through, grabs their pill, and there's numbers on the pill, and you just start at number one, and there may be some numbers that get skipped or whatever, but you just go down, from one down to however many you put in there for the people there. And when your number gets called, you go up and hang your tag. You have a little plastic tag with your name on it, and we have this map of the marsh was drawn in like 1960 something, which is cool because it's completely backwards to how it actually lays on the club, but we've all gotten used to it. And we have little cup hooks up there, and you just hang your tag, on the morning or the afternoon for whatever blind you want to hunt. And we found out about 20 years ago that our blinds would go twice as far if we had AM and PM hunting. So, then you have the chance once you hunt in the morning to come back and take your tag and put it on another spot, for the afternoon hunt if you want to. And at our club, you can own one or two shares. And a number of guys own 2 shares, and so they have 2 draws. I mean, they pay twice as much, so why not? And then we also have the ability to, if a member knows he's not going to hunt that season, he can sell his shooting rights, and that typically happens inside the club, from one member to another member. So, a member who owns one membership can pick up the other guy's shooting rights by paying his dues for the year, and then he can, he gets 2 draws as well.
And if you draw, if you draw number 1 and I draw number 3, nobody draws 2. You go up and put it on a blind, and you go out and shoot your limit real fast. Can I go into that blind if I have 3? Can I just move over to that blind?
Well, you can, but you don't know if that's going to happen. So you've got to hang your tag someplace so that you can be out there. And a lot of times when there's an area, it's like any place you hunt. There'll be parts of the club early in the season that are much better than they are in the middle of the season, where there's other parts of the club that are hot then and other parts that are hot later in the season. So, you get a lot of, the guys with the really good draws draw the blind where the birds are, and then the guys with the sort of good draws a lot of times will draw the peripheral areas. So, you get some of the spin off from that. And in the odd day, it doesn't happen that frequently, but where a guy goes in there and just, kills his bird so fast, one of the guys from the blinds close by can certainly move in there and shoot in that blind, and until the morning's over. Yeah.
Can every blind has decoys in them for the members to use? Or you're responsible for bringing out your own spread every morning, or how's that work?
We have both. We have a few blinds that are long walks that there's no boat trail or anything to get to that we have started. We'll put a tank blind in spots like that, assuming it's not a tule marsh, which it isn't. They aren't typically. We'll have a tank blind, and so we'll put a couple dozen decoys in there so a guy didn't have to, so a 70-year-old guy can walk into that blind and hunt it just like the 30-year-old guy can. He doesn't have to haul all that stuff on his back. There's a few blinds like that. We have probably a third of our blinds are tank blinds, a third of them are stand-up wood blinds, and a third of them are areas that have no blind, because people like to hunt out of layout boats or like to build their own little blinds, or do whatever they do, sit in the tules on a tule stool. So we try to provide that opportunity for all the 3 ways people like to hunt.
And everybody uses spinning wings and mojos, or are they legal, or what's the rule?
We don't. We don't use them. We don't allow them on the club until December. And from December to the end of the year, we do allow them. The reason we don't allow them earlier is because we all hunt in such close proximity to each other. Early in the season is when we get the most use of the club, right? And we hunt in close proximity. So if the spinning wings are working, that's great. If they're not, then, you're sitting over there with 3 of them going in your draw, and I'm in the draw next to you, and it's spooking all the birds. Well, it's affecting my hunt too. It isn't so much that you're killing all the birds, because once you get your ducks, it doesn't matter how you get them. I mean, within, it has to be legal. You're done. You're out of there, right? So
Right.
that's not an issue that one guy kills more birds than the other. It's that those spinners and the use of them can affect the people around you negatively if the birds have seen that. And we do get you've hunted with me enough out there and on your own enough out there in the Stillwater Marsh. If we don't have a weather system or a big weather event north of us for 2 or 3 weeks, our ducks get really stale, because there's not that, we're not looking at hundreds of thousands of them there at a time. It's more like 80,000 of them. That's good. So those guys can all go through the spin cycle pretty quick, and then they get pretty wise to the whole deal. So,
So as part of the club, you said you're an island right in the middle of this refuge. Well, that refuge isn't as far as farming practices and agriculture and farming for wildlife. Are you doing that at the club? Is there a farming system out there? Are you growing food? How does that work in the state of Nevada? And talk about, you got John out there he's been out there since he was
17.
Since he was 17, and
Yeah.
he's 60 now.
Yeah, he and I are the same age. Yeah.
And he's been working at the club since
He's been our manager for 43 years. Yeah.
Wow. And he's the ranch foreman, manager.
Uh-huh.
And so right now, this time of year right now, is that club being drained, and what's going on right now?
Sure. So this time of year, first of all, let me touch on that subject of John Carrington is his name. He's our ranch foreman, and like I said, he came to work there when he was 17, and that was 43 years ago. So he is acknowledged by the biologists, by people who know ducks and everything. I mean, that guy is a magician with moving water in the desert and making it duck habitat. I mean, he's seen it all so many times, and the stuff that goes around in his brain amazes me to this day when I drive around the club with him and the ideas and stuff he comes up with. It's incredible to have that resource. So the Canvasback Club is as good as it is in great part because of the longevity of that relationship. That the same guy has been trying to create new and different duck habitat, and has seen the effects of whether you add a foot of water or only 4 inches of water or whatever you do, whatever the differences, the variances are. And he's very good about keeping track of all of that stuff in his mind, and he knows how to reproduce it, which is great. So we do farm out there, to answer your question directly. There's a little farming around us. Most of the farming at that end of the valley is alfalfa farming. So other than, for geese to go into and graze in the wintertime, there's not a lot of grain out at the end of the valley we're at. You get closer to the town of Fallon, there's a lot of corn grown these days, and that has become a popular pastime in December and January when the mallards get in the cornfields. It's pretty unique and fun.
Especially for Nevada. Huh?
Yeah. I mean, that just doesn't happen in Nevada. And so the farming we do, most of our fields are 20 to 40 acres. We don't raise corn as a rule because it's so water intensive, but we raise a lot of millet. What we try to do with 80% of our fields is have them on a 2-year rotation, which means this September we'll plant a field for winter wheat. So by late October, November, and certainly December, it's green, green carpet looking, and the geese typically are looking for that green grass or green wheat in this case. And so we hunt geese over it for that first year, and then the next spring we irrigate it, grow it up, to where we have a harvestable crop, and then we don't harvest it, and then we just flood it for ducks the next year. So we get 2 years out of the same field, and we have 10 fields we do that with probably. And then we also plant, we augment the marsh where we can. We'll plant millet in it or something like that. The ducks like that, and millet is great because it grows up, and if you let it grow tall, you can just raise the water up to where the ducks can get to it. We've had really, really good success with millet over the years. But, over the course of the year, we probably get more duck use on the natural feed that we raise there than anything. You'll certainly see 5,000 mallards go into a field of wheat when we first flood it. I mean, if they're there, they'll do that, and it's pretty cool to see that. One shot fired and they're all over on the refuge again. But the farming part of it, the farming part that a lot of people don't realize is the moist soil management we do. Like this time of year, we're draining the ponds slowly, letting them evaporate off basically. And once they get down to where there's no more water on the surface, the plants that we want to grow, like swamp timothy is a huge one for us, but smartweed, all kinds of things, will start growing, and then we might have to put a little water on it later in the year, but typically we don't on those moist soil units. We don't have to flood it until we get to September, and we're starting to flood up for the waterfowl season.
And you're saying that one man is pretty much responsible for that? I mean, he has a
Absolutely.
couple work days a year, but this is his vision, and he's making it. Like John could probably go and, is it just desert that he would be beneficial in, or could he go to?
Oh no, he's
just a magician with duck property.
Right. He just he knows what ducks like, and over the years he's he knows how to look for those little things that he did different, and see how the ducks react to it. And he could do that anywhere. I mean, the plants change, and to some degree the ducks change. The types of ducks, but. Yeah, once you're a duck doctor like that, man, you got the prescription down.
Could you imagine if, and he might, I don't know, and I love John. He's an awesome dude. His wife's awesome. Could you imagine if, hindsight's always 20/20, they say, but what if he had a photo album or a video or camera, and the people that he's watched grow up on that club, the talent and the families and the memories, the dinners. I mean, I've been out there at dinners with you with guys that are cooking. I mean, it's just amazing, the camaraderie out there.
Yeah.
I wonder if he does. And could you imagine if he did what he has witnessed out there?
Yeah.
Not to mention the work he's done in the duck
Sure.
properties produced, but his story is amazing, right?
It is, and I mean there are members who've been there longer than John, and John, understand he is kind of unique. Both of his grandparents were members at the club, so John literally has been there his whole life. You know, from the time he was a little kid, and he killed his first duck there and hunted there and learned how to duck hunt there and everything, and then ended up going to work there and has spent his whole working career there. So, like I said before, we've been really fortunate with that. But yeah, the things he's seen in the 40-some years that he's been the ranch manager, or in the 60 years of his life, are pretty incredible. We have a few other members that have been there about that long too.
And when you talk about members, you said that you have equity, or two. You can have 2 shares, or you have one. Let's say you have 1 share. You go to John, Dave, and Katie, and they're not interested in it. They're moving out of Nevada. I say, Dave, I want to buy your share. Can you sell it to me right away, or do you have to get approval by the club?
You have to be approved. I don't. You know, obviously, I can bring a sale to the membership, and then we notice the membership, and as long, I think they have 20 days to object. If they have a real reason, it can't be a personal reason, but I mean a real reason to object to somebody becoming a member, then the membership does have the option to say no, but again, with good cause. And then, yeah, I can sell it to you, sure.
And that comes with your property, your cabin.
It can. I've seen situations where they've sold cabin to an existing member and then sold their membership to somebody else. But that just depends on how they're working the deal out. But some members share cabins, so when those guys get old and decide to get out, one family ends up with the cabin and the other guy just has a bare membership to sell. So yeah, all of the above occur from time to time.
And if you aren't lucky enough to be a member of the Canvasback Club, which I consider it like just such a great place, and you guys have just made it into what I call it an oasis, because it really is an oasis in the desert. And if you're a duck hunter,
it is.
And like you said, if you live in Reno and you have the opportunity to have that 90 miles away, you're pretty lucky.
Very.
The public, I've had some great public land hunts out there with you, swan hunting, canvasback hunting, mallard hunting, cutting holes in the ice with chainsaws and just, and getting after. I mean, you name it, we've done it out there. That part of Nevada, a lot of people think of Nevada, even Idaho sometimes, like there's no ducks out there.
Right.
And you've already said that we don't get a ton of them, but we can have some pretty stellar hunting. Starting at Fernley, and you used to have the Fernley wetlands, and I want to be educated.
Coming back.
They're coming back. Yeah. I want to be educated on this. So that whole corridor from, when you're on I-80 and there's Fernley there, then you cut off from Fernley and that takes you over to Fallon. You got the Greenhead over there. You got the Carson River. You have the Canvasback Club, Stillwater. But you come back this way towards the interstate. You have Jessup. You have the Humboldt, the Toulon. You have Rye Patch.
Yeah.
We mentioned Fernley already. So at one time, that was all wetlands, and it went dry with the droughts or civilization and industrial and communities coming in. What happened in our history that broke all that up?
Dams on the rivers. And I mean those marshes dried up from time to time. I mean there were droughts far more severe than anything we've seen. Based on how they read trees and that kind of thing, where the growth slows down and all of that. So we haven't seen the worst of the droughts. We being humans haven't necessarily, but I think the dams on the river and by necessity, the upstream water users, that water's being pulled out and used for something else that used to just flow freely into those sinks. So that the Stillwater Marsh and the Humboldt Sink were always combined or close to it, for many, for most of the years. They would actually meet out there not too far from
Didn't you say at one time John took a boat from the club to Humboldt or to the Toulon?
Actually, Norm Sakey did. Yeah, took it from Stillwater and went all the way to Lovelock in an airboat. Right now you'd have to drive 25 miles across dry ground to pull that off.
Really?
In between the two, and they both have a considerable amount of water in them right now. But that was in the 80s, and there was a huge flood. And yeah, you could do that. But I think the dams on the rivers have it's created agriculture for sure, but at the expense of wetlands, which is pretty much the case most places.
And being out there as long as you have, and seeing the memories that it creates. And obviously, myself, my brothers have been out there. Katie, John, David. When you walk into your cabin, you take a hard left and you look at your wall, and you don't even have enough room on it anymore to put the pictures on there that you've created out there. What stands out is, I mean, like with your career out there and you and John being out there for so many years of your life, a lot of your adult life has been spent at the Canvasback Duck Club and the Stillwater Marsh. John, David, and Katie grew up out there. John David still loves being out there. He's still running tractor as we speak right now out there.
He is.
What stands out? Like, just like there's got to, if I came to you and just said, why did you do it? I mean, can you look back and say, here's why?
Yeah. Seeing my kids grow up out there. And if you ask them today, the best thing I ever did for them, they would tell you it was that we belong to the Canvasback.
Because you killed so many mallards?
No, because that's where they learned how to drive a car. That's where they learned how to drive a boat. That's where they learned how to probably crash a car and sink a boat and lots of other things I don't know about, which is fine because, out there nobody got hurt, no harm, no foul. But no, it was just they got to grow up out there as much or as little as they wanted to, and both of them loved it to the point where it was a lot. I mean, John David, I think, has worked for us almost every part of every summer since he was 16, and he's 33 now. He still comes back. I mean, he lives in Alaska for part of the year, in Texas for a part of the year, and he still comes back in April and May to do the farming at the club because it's part of him. It's a cool
Loves
thing.
it.
Yeah.
And the skills that he honed, I mean, it's no secret of what he's a natural born killer.
Yeah.
Obviously, he grew up, and his calling skills, his vocalization, what he's done on stage for duck and goose calling competitions, he would probably in an interview say that the Canvasback is pretty much responsible for that.
Yeah, he would. He would for sure. I mean, that's, it's just such a great environment for kids, and a lot of our members, make sure their kids spend some time out there, and there's a group of those kids that grew up together with my kids that are, they'll hunt together their whole lives. They're their best friends, and that's great to see.
When you talk about what else benefits out there, there's a lot of science that happens out there. What I mean by that is banding
Yep.
studies and banding initiatives. We had Bill Henry out there for several years as a biologist. Chris Nicolai, who
talked to him this morning.
What kind of man is Chris Nicolai? What do you sum him up for me? Because he's kind of like a unicorn, to where you see a picture of a unicorn and I see a picture of Nicolai, and then he's just gone. He's like he's up here doing this with geese, or over here doing this with cacklers, and I've seen him down in California working with California Waterfowl Association at Bird Haven. And what kind of man is he? What is he? What do you attribute to him?
He is. He has a PhD in waterfowl and in some portion of waterfowl biology. He's a brilliant guy. He's completely personable. You would never know that unless you got into a serious discussion with him about waterfowl, that he's a PhD in it. He has two little girls who have banded more waterfowl probably than most men that have done it for a living. I mean, seriously. They have been all over the place with Chris. It's a family affair. He's a great family man. I hunted with Chris and his daughter Grace a couple times this fall, and have in the past too. Matter of fact, I saw her shoot her first duck out of the air too. But just a great guy. He's totally excited about the technology that's out there today. He called when we were talking today. He was telling me about the collars that they have on these snow geese, and yesterday, for whatever reason, was the day the snow geese took off and went north. And oddly enough, the farmer that I live with in Canada called me yesterday and said, "Hey, the snow geese got here today." And Chris told me the same thing this morning based on the feedback he got from his callers this morning when he flipped his computer on. So, I mean, in exactly the same place too. So, it's cool to see that work like that. But he's a treasure, man. We're so lucky to have a guy like that lives in Nevada. That he doesn't work for the Department of Wildlife, but he has done some work with them, some really important work. The Fallon Wood Duck Project is a groundbreaking research project on the effects of hunting on a closed waterfowl population like the wood ducks on the Carson River. And the guy who helped Chris with that is now getting his PhD, I think this week or next week he defends his PhD paper, Ben Settinger, and Ben did it on based on the population dynamics of or the effects on the population of hunting, on a closed population of birds. So there's some great information that has come out of that has not been known before. But Chris is, if it has to do with waterfowl, he's interested in it.
Why would you stay in Nevada with that background and that career choice?
Well, it's just as he says, it's just the job opportunities that open up, And now he's embarking on a career, hopefully, or another part of his career where he's going to be, in charge of banding pretty much in the western United States. Not of everybody's banding, but he's going to do specific banding, looking at populations and what they do and where they go. Because now with these new collars that they put on them, it's not like the old ones, with the big thing glued to it and an antenna and everything on it. Everything is contained within the collar now. And as long as they have cell phone coverage, they know exactly what that bird did every 5 minutes or whatever the download time is. They can speed it up to every minute, so they know exactly what the bird did minute to minute.
Really?
Yeah. So it's and then if they go way up north to nest, so for 4 months they're out of cell phone range. The second they migrate back into cell phone range, all of that data downloads from the last 4 months. They even have solar panels on the collars now, so that it recharges the batteries. I mean, this thing can go forever. It's crazy.
But evolving is everything, and all that does is help us with management.
Absolutely. We're not guessing anymore. We will hopefully be able to determine population dynamics much more accurately, so that we're not reacting to them, but we're and when I say we, specifically as hunters, we're not reacting to it. We're an active part in the management, which is where we need to be.
And we've talked about it here before. You and I have had several personal conversations about the heart of a hunter and the work that hunters do and the money that hunters do put into it. And Chris is a hunter, and he does kill a few birds, but the whole mindset and ideology again of a man like that he's dedicated his life to the birds. You've dedicated your life to the club. John's dedicated his life to land management and building that oasis out there. And yeah, let's get to it. I mean, there is hunting on the club. There is hunting in the Stillwater Marsh. We do kill some ducks. You've had some awesome, I've had awesome hunts out there. You've had tons. You're the luckiest band guy that I know. It seems like every picture you send me, another banded gadwall. What does it take to be successful at the club? You hone your skills as a duck hunter. There's a lot of opportunity out there. What do you specialize in out there? Do you want to be a great caller? Is motion more important with you taught me the importance of a jerk rig several years ago, and the word Stillwater is there for a reason.
Right.
The wind doesn't blow
there very much.
So the ripples are important. So, when you hunt out there, you got to know what you're doing. Just because it's a duck club doesn't mean that everybody goes out there and gets their 7 green eggs.
That's right. No, it doesn't mean that at all. And honestly, a fella told me, and I can't remember who it was. It was just a guy I ran across when I first started hunting at Stillwater, and told him I was from Virginia and everything. He goes, "Well, I'm going to give you a piece of advice." I said, "Okay, sure." He goes, "Get yourself a good pair of binoculars." He goes, "You hunt out here, and you'd have to experience the Stillwater Marsh to understand this, but it's a sink, so it's flat. It's just the bottom. It's where the river flows out into, and again, it fills up in the fall and winter and evaporates down in the spring and summer, and so it's flat. So you have a great vantage point, to watch things with your binoculars, and that's true on the club. It's true at Stillwater, whatever. You watch those birds and you watch what they do, and so today I might not be in the right spot. But tomorrow or next Wednesday or next Saturday, whenever the next hunt day is, I know those birds are going over there, and I know where they're going, so I'm going to go over there and find out why they're going there. And a lot of that, maybe you won't even be in the right spot then, but you'll go in there and look, and you'll go, okay, this is what they're looking for. Whether it's the solitude and protection created by a little tule pond off in some corner of the club that nobody's bothering them, or they're out on the big sheet water because the sago is just thick as you can't even wade. Your dog can't get through it. It's so thick, So you have to look at those things, and then you can do things to improve your odds. Learning how to call, learning when to call more than anything. And you and I've hunted together a lot, and we've hunted with the best callers in the world. And I don't mean that they could functionally operate a duck call the best. I mean, they knew when to talk, and more importantly, when to shut up. You learn that. You learn, the birds, as the season progresses, they shy away from the blinds. They get it. They figure it out. Those dark spots aren't good. So, even though that blind is really comfortable to sit in and everything, you may be better off in your layout boat laying over in the grass over here, even though you're hunting the same place, right? It's just they're going to just give that blind enough berth that not hunting in it, hunting someplace other than the blind, you'll be far more successful. So that has a lot to do with it. But the scouting and not just pre-scouting, but when you're out there, we're glorified bird watchers for 95% of our day. I don't care how good your hunting is. That's what you do. You just watch birds. That's what we do. And you and I, talked about it early on in this conversation about how we're laying in a field in Canada and we're done shooting. But man, we're not going anywhere. The birds want to be there. We want to watch them come in.
We're starving.
Yeah.
We're staying.
Yeah, we're staying until it gets dark, or somebody finally makes us come to our senses. So it's I think the biggest key to where we are, because you can see so far, is those binoculars and checking out the area around you, not just what you're doing. I grew up hunting in the woods in Virginia, and you can't see anywhere there. I mean, you have to go and walk and kick birds up and figure out what they're doing, because you can't see them go in. It's all trees. There's no way to see them. So, not unlike hunting at the Bimeda in Arkansas, except not nearly as many people around. But yeah, so out here, the nice thing is that you do get to see the birds fly every day. There's birds around when there's birds around. There's no doubt about it. And then you just got to figure out what they're doing and get there before they do.
Are most of the members, are they pretty, do they hush, or are they pretty forward to share their information? Like, hey man, I had a great hunt here. If you draw this, go there. Or is there a lot of secrets going on?
There'll always be some, secretive nature to some of the duck hunters, but honestly, it's such a good group of guys out there that we realize that's why we have the draw. If you get the number one draw, I don't want to see you go to a crappy place because you don't know any better. I want to see you go get a great hunt. That's what it's about. Everybody's going to get their low draws over the year, so you want to see everybody succeed. And so I think that's far more prevalent. Plus, now, we built bird towers. We've done all of these things to make it so that people can come down on Friday afternoon and sit up in the bird tower and watch the birds fly and figure out, oh, okay, that's where they're going, So they make better choices. We want them to be successful, And granted, you want to get your own too, but there's not a lot of secrets out there now, Occasionally you'll run across one, but now people are very forthcoming with the help.
You've been duck hunting for how long now?
Well, if you count the first time my dad took me, 57 years.
How long have you?
But I've been shooting since I was 10, so 50 years.
50 years of duck hunting in the United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
Are you a fan of it today? And when I say that, do you like the product part of it, the evolution of it, the gear part of it? Are you a gear junkie? I know in fly fishing is gear intensified.
Yeah.
You got to have your waders and your felt boots and your rod and your reel. And in duck hunting, there's no secret. It's gear intense, and we spare no dollar when it comes to gear. It seems like. Do you like the evolution of decoys, the paint schemes, the feather detail, the texturing, the calls and where calls have come? It's not just your old big fat looking wood calls. They've gotten so aerodynamic and cool looking in paint schemes, and that's a little part of it. But as far as a whole, duck hunting gear, every year we come out with what I call apparatuses that we think are going to help us trick those birds or give us a better chance. They were killing a lot of ducks back in the day with not this. What's your feeling on that?
Well, I'm not, for example, a spinning wing decoy, they have their place. And in my world, their place is in those 2 square mile fields in Canada where you need to get the birds close enough to see your decoys. So you use a spinner, right? In a marsh environment like in Nevada where we hunt, not so much. I mean, I never use them there, but that's personal preference. I'm not saying they're wrong. That's just the way I look at it. Okay, gear. Yeah, coming from a fly fishing, being a fly fishing retailer for 30 years. Yeah, I'm a gear junkie for sure. I mean, if it's, but I find myself now going more towards the gear. Gear you wear. The clothing, maybe the backpack you take with you. Shotgun shells, the technology in those is crazy good now compared to what it was. And all you have to do is go buy a box of shells and take an hour and go shoot at a piece of paper and shoot all the different kinds of shells and find out the ones that work the best in your gun. I mean, it isn't rocket science, but those kind of things can improve your hunting dramatically. I think that I hate to see too many things, and I'll use the spinner as an example, too many things that are mechanical getting involved in it, because that takes away from your skill or my skill or the next guy's skill. And not that it should be a skill game, but that's part of why we all enjoy it. You develop some skill at this and you go out and you do it well, and it's just more fun than if it's the difference in duck hunting and duck shooting. You can go to places. You're probably going to one this summer in Argentina, right? Yeah. You're going to go duck shooting down there. Okay, yeah. That's okay. That's what it's about. That's an experience. That's that's a deal all unto its own. But you will continue even after that experience to like duck hunting more because it's got so much more to it. And I think you're talking about the gear and all of this. Duck hunting is an expensive sport, and that works against us. There are fewer duck hunters now than there were 30 years ago, and that's because of that, partially because of that. I think there are two things that inhibit duck hunter numbers growing. One is just the cost. If you want to be a quail hunter, you get yourself a good pair of boots, a shotgun, and a box of shells and go quail hunting. You can put them in your pocket when you shoot them. It does, you don't have to have all of this stuff. So duck hunting is very gear intensive. The other thing that you have with duck hunting that you don't so much have with at least the other types of bird hunting is you have to be able to identify the birds now, because all the limits are subject to 2 hen mallards, 1 sprig, 2 canvasbacks, 3 scaup. That's very, very, that sends up big red flags to people who don't have a clue what a mallard is when it's sitting on the table in front of them, So that's a tough one to overcome. I'm going to tell you what I think about that. I think they should, we have a 7 bird limit in the West, and I love that. I mean, we get a lot of days where we get to shoot 7 ducks if we want to. Where I grew up in the East Coast now, I think the limit's 5 or 6, depending on where you are. And in Arkansas, it's a little less, but they kill more ducks there than most any place in the country. I think they should just have a splash 5 limit. If the populations can support it, or a splash 4 limit, or whatever. And by that I mean that you shoot 5 ducks and you're done, and don't worry about it.
Even if it's 5 hen mallards, it's biologically proven that it's probably not going to affect the population.
And right? We were talking about Chris Nicolai earlier. He will stand here and tell you, and someday you should do this with him, believe me, that will have no effect on the population. It is biologically indefensible. It's sort of like catch and release fishing. We don't know how many of those fish we let go die, right? We know how many of those hen mallards we kill die, every one of them. But it's such a small number in the overall scheme of the population that it's not, it's not significant. According to the people that I listen to, which are people with PhDs or a life like Bill Henry spent his whole life, as a waterfowl biologist. But at the least, I think on the youth hunts, it should be a splash, whatever, pick a number, 4. That's plenty of ducks for a kid who's never shot any ducks or, only had an opportunity once or twice. We're setting this up to where it is set up to where it's very difficult. Think of yourself as a 40-something-year-old man, and tomorrow was the first day you're going to go duck hunting, and this guy's telling you, okay, now these ones with the green heads and these with the white on the wing patch, and you're just going, whoa.
Yeah, and then there's all the regulations on top of that. Is like you can use a spinning wing here, but not here. If you own property, you can use it, but next door on the public land, you can't use it. You can use it starting this date. Your boat motor has to be this many horsepower. You can't use mud motors. They're trying to ban the mud motor on Arkansas
certain
WMH.
Number of shells.
Certain number of shells.
Size of shells.
Yeah, there's a lot of that goes into being a duck hunter that you got to keep straight.
And we have done that to presumably make the hunting better or make it to where we could do it. And I don't mind the restrictive regulations when it comes to if they're restricting my bag limit or something like that. I'm okay with it. I'd way rather give up ducks than give up days. I'd rather have a 107-day season and only shoot 3 ducks than have a 60-day season and be able to kill 10 a day.
Because we're out there.
Exactly. It's not about that,
We're out there.
And you got to get to that point. I remember when my answer would have been different to that, when I was 20-something.
But the sooner you can in your career, and I said this a couple of weeks ago, is that the sooner you realize that in your hunting career, whatever you call it, might not be a career, but
it gets so much better.
Yeah, you just start to realize that stacking them up and pile them up, but it's those when you drive out to the still waters and see that sun coming up or going down and being on that bird tower, or maybe having a high ball around a campfire, cooking a steak outside of your cabin. That's what if a 21-year-old kid. I understand being bloodthirsty and wanting to kill. I get that, and taking the pictures. We all did it.
Sure.
But if they can start learning that at 21, 25, 30 years old and they get past that, your hunt is so much more complete. And that you summed it up perfect right there, that 107-day season isn't about killing 7 mallards every day. It's about getting to go.
Right.
And now here we are in April and we want to go.
Yep.
And we would if it was open.
Yeah.
But we can't. We can't.
Yeah. No,
one question I have on that, or one concern, it's not really a concern, but we love to cook ducks and eat ducks. You and our families, we get together a lot.
We do.
And cook a lot of ducks.
We had duck tacos yesterday at lunch.
At lunch. They were awesome.
They were awesome. You made them. Very good.
But you make awesome duck all the time. Mama Dell's and the recipes you do and what you've taught me with tenderloins and all that. What is a possession limit? You can go out and kill a daily limit.
Right.
What is a possession limit?
It's 3 times the daily limit.
So in the state of Nevada, you have 7 ducks. So in my freezer, legally, I can have 21 ducks.
That's correct. On your license. And then if you have another license holder that lives in your house or keeps their ducks here, whatever, I think it's probably by the law they have to live here, but, then that's another 21. And, or however many geese that is and whatever. Where that gets gray to me is like we can bring back ducks from Canada, and you and I do, or if I go hunt in Idaho and I bring back ducks from Idaho, I don't know if it's a universal. I've never asked.
I know the daily limit is.
Well, the daily limit doesn't change, right? Well,
I've had opportunities like with Keith Allen and guys around Missouri, Kentucky, and Illinois to where you're going to go kill a limit. You can't do it.
No, you can't.
You can only.
It's a daily limit.
Daily limit
in that flyway is the way they define it. But yes.
But what sense does it make if we're going to eat ducks year round and we go duck hunting every day? And we don't want to eat them the night we kill them, but we know we're going to eat them in April like we did yesterday.
Sure.
I just don't understand the ideology behind, and I know there's reason in scientific data to support it, but I go out and I hunt every day, or let's say I could get to hunt 50 days next year in Nevada. Right. And let's say I kill my limit half of those, 25 times 7. I don't know what that is, but it's about 175 birds. Yeah. 175 birds.
You got to eat a lot of ducks, buddy.
But you got to eat them in a hurry because you can only have 3 times in your freezer. Now, what if I get them processed into jerky or into sticks? Does that count if they?
I think in the U.S. that takes them off of your. I believe it does, because how can they identify it? They can't.
It's mixed with pork fat.
Right.
It's the deal. But if they come in there and I have some vacuum sealed bags and it says Nevada mallards December 30th, Nevada mallards January 7th, Nevada mallards January 10th. Those are the only ducks I can legally have in there. What if I have a California license? Can I have my legal possession limit of California birds in there too?
That's a good question, and I honestly have never asked that question to a law enforcement official, and it's a good question to ask him. I'll find out the answer to that though.
I just want to
because I've always wondered about it, and then I just never get around to.
Because you hunt California.
I do.
Well, what if you go for a week over there and you bring back your ducks? There's just so much gray area, and you don't want to break the law.
No.
Okay, so I go to California and I kill my greenheads and a couple specks, and I leave California. Legally, you have to have a wing attached across that state line and be able even to take them out of the field or to take them out. there's to travel with waterfowl. I understand all that. All I'm saying is that in my freezer, I just want to be able to have a surplus of wild game for the year. I don't want to have to eat them all right then.
Right.
And if I can only have 21 ducks in my freezer at a time, that's
not
one
gonna
dinner
last.
for us.
Yeah,
That's
that's
one dinner.
not going to last very long. No,
So
I agree.
if you go out and you hunt and you're good and you're proficient at it and you spend the money, I'm just like, well, if I hunt 50 days, why can't I have 50 days of ducks in my freezer if I'm going to eat them? Do they think that most people just let them get freezer burnt and toss them?
No,
Is it an excess waste problem?
It's goes back to, if you recall, like 5 years ago or something, they increased the possession limit from 2 days limit to 3 days limit.
Yep.
And that's a concession to the fact that market hunting really doesn't occur anymore in any significant form. All of that, the limits and everything, are ultimately were started because of, to stop market hunting, right? And then they started doing it species specific to help manage the species. And you talk to 10 people about how that's gone, and half of them will be on one side of the fence and half on the other. But it's a throwback from the days when people would shoot them just because they could, and it's a little help to law enforcement to ensure that doesn't happen now. If a guy's going to do that, he's not going to care about, if he's going to shoot 100 ducks in a weekend, he's not going to care about how many of them are in his freezer. That's going to be the least of his worries, right?
Right.
Which is a terrible thing to think about, but I guess that could happen. I don't think the reason for that possession limit that you and I are talking about is being addressed for a guy like yourself or myself who loves to eat ducks. I mean, if our doctors knew we were eating that much red meat, they'd have a stroke, much less us.
No.
But I mean, we love it, and we do eat it, and we eat it every week, and we eat it sometimes several times a week. And during the season, I mean, when we're in Canada, we eat ducks 4 or 5 days a week, for either for the main course or for appetizers or whatever. We make them all different kinds of ways, and and when you're there, we eat them more than that because we just come up with new ways to cook them.
Exactly.
On the grill outside while we're playing horseshoes or whatever. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's an interesting question, and I'll find out the answer to that. But it does inhibit people who love to eat waterfowl.
I get it. You have to. It's almost like they're penalizing the good guys for what they think the bad guys or the quote unquote outlaw is going to do. And I get it. If you come into my house and you see 200 ducks in my freezer, you're like, did you just kill those yesterday?
Right.
Well, I mean, you didn't catch me doing it. They're all marked and dated and vacuum sealed. You can tell I take pride in my wild game and
Sure.
how we take care of it. We don't want it to get freezer burnt. We know how to drain it and get the blood out of it. There's a lot that goes into being a good processor and butcher. And that's
Totally.
and we take a lot of pride in that. I've seen you and my brother out there with elk and sheep and cutting them up and vacuum sealing them and doing all kinds of stuff with the meat. And
Yep.
I don't know. It's just a question to me because I'm straight up. A lot of times I have more than my possession limit in my freezer, and I hope that it gets to the point to where that it's trusted that we're not. I'm not
Right.
going to go out and break. I don't want to. I don't get off on killing
No.
50 ducks. I wouldn't do it if
No.
maybe I would if you could, if it was legal once in a while, but killing 50 ducks means you got to clean 50 ducks.
And then you have to do something with them.
Then you got to do something with them. I love having big parties and making awesome recipes for people with duck. I have a lot of pride in that, and I want duck. A lot of times, if I'm out of it, I call you and say, "Hey, can you bring some duck over?"
Sure.
What's the law on that? Am I legally allowed to eat your ducks?
Yes, you are.
It's just there's so many like things you got to weave through as a waterfowl hunter.
Right.
I understand, and the reason I'm asking this because you brought up a great point is maybe that is why our numbers are dwindling in waterfowl population, licenses being bought, duck stamps being brought. That brings up a question: is why do we have to have a state stamp for every state we go to? Most states have a duck stamp, and then you have to have the federal stamp, which the price just increased to 40 from 25.
Yeah, it went up some. I'm not sure what it is, but yeah.
Does all that money from a state stamp go into wetlands for that state, and all that federal money, does that go into supporting duck hunting? Is that a big part of why Ducks Unlimited or our feds are able to do what they do?
Sure. I think the answer to your question is no, that all of that money doesn't go to that, depending on the state. In Nevada, I think it has for the most part, but it's a small amount in Nevada. It's not hundreds of thousands of hunters or anything. Matter of fact, Nevada this year did away with all stamps. They raise the cost of the license, and each license that's purchased, X amount of that money goes into the duck, what would be the duck stamp fund, but there is no stamp anymore. Same thing with upland. We don't have an upland stamp anymore. It's just they just increase the cost of the license, and everybody shares that cost of a trout stamp equally. But the money's taken out of there and put towards those programs. But and I'm not sure that's the answer. That's just Nevada's answer. And I believe if you ask the Department of Wildlife why, they would just tell you that the cost of administering a stamp program outweigh the benefits of having the stamp. It costs too much to do it.
So can I get one if I'm a collector, or are they gone for good?
I think they're gone for good.
Really?
I don't believe we're going to have any more. I think your collection is complete. I could be wrong, but I believe that's correct. Matter of fact, I know it's right. Yeah, that is right.
When we've talked about, John and the farming, and you and I discussed this, we both hunt Idaho. Mm-hmm. We both hunt a lot of places where there is what is flooded corn, and that brings us to ethical or normal traditional farming practices.
Right.
Is hunting over flooded corn baiting with the way it draws ducks in?
It can be incredibly effective. I mean, we've seen it, where it's just crazy effective. But there's a lot of corn in the western United States, and all of it that you flood doesn't magically attract ducks. It's more because of where you are with that flooded corn than, and so who's to say that if you grew millet instead of corn, they wouldn't come into that? Okay, you see what I'm saying?
100%.
I think it's the fact that there is a crop, not that it is that crop. And as far as normal agricultural practices go, you can do that by flooding corn, because eventually it's going to dry out, and then you go in and harvest it and silage it, or not silage it, but you seed corn or feed corn, whatever. It'll be feed corn in that case, but you can still you can get dual benefit from that crop, and there are places, like specifically where you and I hunt in Idaho, where that duck crop is just as important as that corn crop on that 300 acres or 500 acres. Now, not globally in Idaho for the hundreds of thousands of acres of corn there is, right? But in those spots, that duck crop brings in as much, if not more money, well, in most cases, way more money than that corn is ever going to bring in. So, yes, you have augmented, you're changing, you're attracting the ducks to come there because that corn is in that water, or you put that water in the corn rather. But, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, and not because I hunt it and because it's great and all that. I just think if you stop that activity, you're going to kill duck hunting in half of the country.
And not to mention the nutritional value it provides for ducks up and down the flyway.
Well, and not just on the way down in the fall. They all eat there at the same restaurant on the way back to Canada.
And they're not getting hunted.
Then, and we're feeding them for free. I mean, not to blow our own horn, but all of the crops we put in at the duck club here at the Canvasback Club never get harvested. They stay in the field. The ducks beat them up pretty bad in the fall and winter, and then they go on south if that's what they do, and then as they come back north, they get the rest of it.
Because there's a lot of ducks out at the club when we were out there a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, man.
And they're still benefiting off of that food source.
Totally. Absolutely.
So on the bill in Idaho a month and a half ago, it was potentially going on the legislature bill to outlaw flooded corn practices for the use of waterfowl hunting. I read it, and I've heard that it's been taken off since. Right. I don't know if you have, because you know.
I've heard the same thing. You're the one that told me about it, and then so I checked into it, and it appears as though that bill has been withdrawn at this moment, or that portion of it.
Is it a normal farming practice to put water on a corn crop?
No.
Then why is it legal to hunt ducks on it when they say you're not allowed to manipulate or create an unethical or not a traditional farming practice?
Well, I don't know.
Where I'm going with that, Dave, is because we both hunt down in California a lot. Is it normal farming practices to flood a rice field after it's been harvested?
Is it a normal farming practice in California to raise rice? That's all brought there. Okay, corn isn't natural to Idaho. Rice isn't natural to California. We created the anomaly by bringing it there in the first place. It's there, okay? They're going to grow corn in Idaho. They're going to grow rice in the California Valley, and the ducks are going to eat it one way or the other, whether you're shooting at them or not. they're going to be in there eating it. Is it, I guess that depends on how broad your definition of a normal farming practice is. As long as you're getting that crop out of the field, or in the case of the Canvasback Club, not getting that crop. We planted it for the birds. Let them have it. Yeah, we're going to shoot a few birds in November and December over that. That's great. Good for us. But a whole lot more birds than those are going to benefit from it. And I don't see the downside to that.
I'm playing devil's advocate because I don't
Sure.
see the downside either. It's you go to North Dakota or South Dakota in November and put some spinning wings and maybe a dozen decoys out in a cornfield, you'll have some of the most powerful mallard duck, some other puddle ducks, but mainly mallards consistently.
Yeah.
It'll blow your mind. Canada and the peas, the same thing. Like, where do you draw the line? What is normal? Like, is that normal to, are you allowed to go in there and
You got it.
Is that baiting when
That's
all
the
that corn's
point.
on the ground, when you're feeding your livestock with it? Where is that? How do you draw the line in any of this?
Sure. I mean, there you don't have to put water on it because you've knocked it all down and presumably harvested most of it. But there's spill grain in every, look at those pea fields in Canada. I mean, how many peas are in those fields after they've harvested
Well,
them?
there's no way a combine's going to get them all.
No,
right?
no, it's not. And same with corn. Even though it's bigger and easier to get, there's still going to be waste crop, and so great, something's using it, and something, this is beneficial to the environment as waterfowl and deer and all of the other things that benefit from that. But see, I don't see any difference in that guy laying in that dry field in North Dakota shooting them after they've harvested the corn than the guy sitting on his toolie stool in the standing corn in Idaho shooting them, and then at the end of the season or whenever they dry it up, they're going to harvest that corn too. It's just a matter of when they harvested it. Yeah, you put water on it, but I don't.
They'd come there if it was dry.
Right,
You kill 'em.
and the birds wouldn't come there at all if there wasn't agriculture.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
you can forget it. They're not coming.
100%. What's the difference then in Kansas? You can let a feeder go off and whitetail hear that, and they know what time it's going off during the day, and they run in.
Yeah.
Or in states where baiting or whatever you define it as is illegal, but you can go out and take out these trees in this area and plant a food crop in there with some unbelievable nutritional value food source, put salt licks around, whatever it is. And is that different? Because now
No.
you've created this little feeding ground for these deer to come into, and you put your blind up on it and draw your bow back and smoke one. What's the difference between it going off and feeding corn on the ground like they legally can do in Kansas,
Right.
or is it as opposed to a different state of like Iowa, to where there's food plots being grown in every piece of the state now because of the whitetail population?
And the difference, well, there is no difference, but when you talk about that versus waterfowl hunting, okay, the main difference is that the birds migrate across many state lines. It's a federally mandated law, as opposed to each individual states. I think the states are far better at managing their wildlife than the federal government is at managing it for us. I mean, really, in my experience, that's been the case. And every state has its issues and everything, but they're there every day. They're not trying to manage everything globally, from the control tower.
It's just the thought process.
They're on the ground.
In Idaho specifically this year, which, Idaho can be awesome for mallard duck hunting.
Of course.
It's known as a big game state for sheep and elk and deer and antelope, and it's got great fishing. It has some good duck hunting around it.
Yes, it does.
Okay, and
But-
it's not
but-
really a secret like
No.
people think it is. Duck Commander was shooting there on videos 15 years ago. There's places that you go,
least.
there's gun clubs there. And then where I'm going with this, Dave, is that up until last year, the year before, outfitting and guiding for elk and deer and all that, you could legally do in the state of Idaho. But when it came to waterfowl hunting, it was illegal to guide or outfit, correct?
That is correct.
So they make it legal, which is what? That's income, livelihood, jobs for guys to go out and become an outfitter. And then you're going to take away the source that they kill the ducks with.
Right.
So
exactly.
I want to go book a hunt to go to Idaho, and you're an outfitter, but what do you mean we can't hunt the flooded corn anymore?
Right.
It's just backwards to me. Like, yeah, go make your living doing this, but you can't do it this way anymore.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
No, none at all.
It's-
It is. There are people getting involved in the equation who are unfamiliar with how the whole thing works. First of all, okay, and that doesn't mean that they don't have good ideas or anything. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that you have to have a global picture of how this works. both hunting and how hunting works with conservation, and how hunters' dollars make conservation happen. And you cut out the hunter, and you cut out a huge amount of our conservation effort in the United States. I don't care whether you're hunting deer or whatever it is. I mean, but certainly ducks, because we're losing. We're losing the battle on the numbers game with ducks, the numbers game of hunters. The ducks are doing fine.
If you just take a place like John Shaw's place up there, and you have a membership up there that you can go in there and hunt mallards in what he's created, which is an amazing property. Incredible. You've hunted around that area. You've hunted other incredible properties right in that same valley in Hagerman. What he does for conservation and
right,
the shorebirds, the rodents, the predators, the mule deer that are gaining nutritional value off of his property. The ducks come through there. Yes, he attracts ducks. He has guys that harvest ducks, but the amount of ducks is so multiplied on a different level compared to what's being harvested. I just want to make sure that people understand that this is a hunter doing this with the heart of a hunter. It's not to destroy the population or create genocide on ducks. We love ducks. John Shaw and guys that are developing these properties all over the country love ducks. We love watching them. And right now, or not right now, but a month ago, you could go up to Idaho and sit in a bird tower and see the most magnificent sight ever because of that property when they're eating it, like we said, on their way back up the flyway.
Yeah.
Getting fat to make that voyage. It's cold way up there where they fly.
It is.
They got to have some carbohydrates in them to make it and have the energy to sustain it. So everything to me is backwards. Like, you want hunters to hunt, but then you want to take away they do it, and then you're going to say that the reason that you're taking it away is because you have the ability to kill too many of them. What? We just said that there's no market hunting anymore.
Right.
We're not going out and killing them and going to sell them for market. We're not doing it.
Right.
So it's just I just
and
think about
fewer people doing
there's fewer people doing it, but it's harder to do. Everything in life becomes harder and harder the more that you group a big group of people around it. And there's just different. It's almost like, I'm comparing it to predator hunting, is like the first thing that a lot of people say when you bring up a coyote is, "Oh, I hate them, goddamn." I'm like, what? How can you say that I hate coyotes?
Right.
I that drives me nuts. They're the most adaptable animal on the planet, and trust me. The reason that your dog got taken out of your backyard is that you shouldn't have had a puppy out there in the first place.
That's right.
We moved into that coyote's backyard, and now we're going to say that we need to get rid of all the coyotes?
Right.
No,
exactly.
we're not going to. So you know what I'm saying? It's like a backwards ideology of like predator management is important. We understand that, but you can't blame the coyote. Okay, you gotta take the good with the bad and everything. And if you're gonna build housing communities way out in the mountains like we live out here in Nevada, you're gonna have coyotes in your backyard. You know what I'm saying? And if you're going to be a manager of land, and you're going to be a hunter, and you're going to provide habitat and food and nutrition for ducks, and you're going to harvest some off them, I don't want people to look at it like you're doing this to benefit off of killing tons and tons of ducks.
Right.
You're not doing it.
No.
You're not. That's not. There's so much conservation efforts that goes into a land management, and if you're allowed to grow food plots to attract white-tailed deer and turkeys, then there's 14 million deer hunters in the country. There's a lot of different ways that you can go kill a deer. It's obvious. That's why so many people do it.
Sure.
Why take away another part of what we do as duck hunters, or even bring it up? It's already hard enough to kill them. They're hard to kill. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that you have to be a genius to kill ducks.
No.
But it's getting harder and harder to find places to do it.
It is. And we're losing places. The wetlands are shrinking, not increasing.
100%.
Yeah. And honestly, agriculture has saved waterfowl in this country. With the loss of wetlands, without replacing that in many places with some, or without agriculture being created there, whether it was at the cost of wetlands or not, we wouldn't have they just wouldn't be here. There's not enough out there for them without America's farmer making it happen.
Yeah, we've always said that
Canada's farmers too.
Yeah, 100%. Farming makes the world go round, and the conservation that farming provides, the food sources that farming provides. Mississippi Flyway, for example, you follow the Mississippi River corridor down from the north to the south. Yes, there's a lot of corn, around that area, Missouri River, Mississippi River. Then you get into the Grand Prairie of Arkansas, and it's the rice country. And arguably you could go and say, well, the rice is attracting ducks to that. Well, they've been going there for hundreds of years, and then you got the flooded timber. Well, these timber plots, that's what that whole area used to look like, and the timber was cut down and made for rice. Well, the ducks are still going into that flooded timber, and when they're in the timber, you can't shoot them out of there. So are you going to tell people to quit hunting in the timber because it's attracting ducks? There's just you can't tell a farmer, you can't tell a hunter, yeah, you can look at the ducks going in that cornfield, but you can't hunt them because they're in corn. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Why can't I hunt them? Well, because there's corn on the ground. They're feeding their livestock. Well, that's natural. That's happened.
That's right.
We're not going to go in there and murder them.
But that's not the people who are making this rule. That's what I was saying about they just come from an uninformed place about the specific thing they're trying to regulate, okay? And they just need to be better informed about it. Your example just then is perfect, I mean, it's... if we're going to have duck hunting, and you and I certainly hope that that's going to be the case, those things are going to exist. I mean, the ducks are going to go in those rice fields when they come south through California, whether you want them to or not. Doesn't matter. And if a farmer can stay in business longer, do better, feed his family better, send his kids to a better college by selling, by putting in a couple of duck hunting pits out in that rice field and selling that in the wintertime, how can you tell him he can't do that? Why would you tell him he can't do that?
Well, I mean, we just sat here for the last 30, 40 minutes and talked about the evolution of gear and products and boats and being able to get to them and spinning wings and better ammo and better guns. And now we're talking about actually farming practices that attract ducks and the nutritional value that provides. You're taking this same amount of hunters, probably less than there were 5, 6, 10 years ago in the duck hunting world. There's way more ducks in the flyways right now than there were 5 years ago. You correct me if I'm wrong, but the studies show and the migration patterns show that there's more ducks pretty much across the board for each species right now. What study could tell you more that something good is happening with the heart of the hunter, the conservation dollar going towards licenses and stamps, guys like John Shaw that are creating duck properties like that? What evidence, what more do you need to know? There's more ducks, and all of this stuff is going on. The thing that there's not more of is hunters, because we're making it more difficult for them to enjoy it.
Which means that the ones who continue to do it pony up more and more every year.
Yeah.
So, not that you're paying for your right to shoot a limit of ducks, and I'm not saying that. You're paying to see them migrate every year is what you're paying, or what I'm paying for. I say that personally. I want to see those birds. I want to get to Canada and see them come off of the boreal forest and off of the tundra there, and I want to be here when they come through here. And if I can shoot them, great. I'm much more apt to be out there more days if I can kill a few ducks and eat them. But that's the conservation dollar goes. It's so often. People say, that money's spent by the hunters, but they just do it so they can shoot a bunch of birds. Well, whatever, okay? Maybe they do that so they can shoot some birds. I don't. I do it so the birds will be there. Yeah. So my kids will have the opportunity to see them. I remember when my dad used to take me hunting, and this is, some little backwater marsh in Virginia, and he'd just say, we'd be there at night, and quitting time would come, and we'd pick up whatever birds we had, whatever, and you just sit there and watch the wood ducks come in by the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, they're landing on the water next to you. The dogs are going crazy. And he'd look at us. I can see him doing it right now, my brother and sister and I, saying, and you remember what this looks like, because I'm afraid it won't be around when you're my age. And I'm lucky. It is around. And I'm his age. I'm way older than he was when he told me that. Yeah. And I've told my kids that, and I want them to tell their kids that. I want them to be aware that they need to watch out for it, that they need to take care of it, or it won't be there. For damn sure, it won't be there. Yeah. But it can be, and it's only going to matter if it matters to people, and it matters to us.
When you say us, I don't know if it. PETA and the antis and there's some good that comes. I love the Audubon, and I understand that we don't agree with hunting, but to say that we want it to end, like, that's ignorance to me. And their money's not going in to protect wildlife. So for them to say we want birds to be here when our kids are our age, and we want them to have their PETA card, and we want them to raise that flag every chance they get. Well, your kids better hope that there's hunters around, because those birds aren't going to be there. Those elk aren't going to be there. Those turkeys aren't going to be there if the hunters aren't there.
That's right.
Is that fair to say?
That is totally fair to say.
And when and we could talk about that. I mean, I just get chills thing about. But I mean, when you say watching birds, I mean, I get my head ripped off a lot in the blind because I'm not very good at calling the shot. And a lot of people are like, well, he's trying to get the perfect shot. And, you know, a lot of what we do, I do like the glory of a bird. I love seeing a bird be a bird. I love seeing a coyote charge with a mouth call and a decoy out there and letting them be a coyote and hunt you. I love when the birds start hunting you up. And I'm in awe a lot. I get stuck in translation a lot because I'm like, oh my gosh, man. Yeah, I think I just called them in. Maybe I didn't, but it doesn't matter. They're here, and look at them and watch them. And I know I love to shoot them and I love to kill them. I love seeing a dog go and bring a mouthful of mallard back. And then I love seeing them on the grill and hearing the sizzle. But just that aura and that awe and that jaw dropping ability for ducks to be ducks and create that power. And it doesn't matter if you're watching them from a mile away and seeing the silhouettes go down with the sun behind them.
Yep.
But when you're underneath them, it's hard for me to call the shot now in my hunting career because I love the majesty of it.
I had a 12-year-old kid was in the field with me in Canada a couple years ago, and these birds came in just beautiful. And there was probably 150 mallards in this flock, and they circled. You know how they go really, really fast, really fast, really fast, and then they start to slow down, usually the pass before when they're going to land. And they came over us, and they were 7 or 8 feet off the deck, and they didn't land, and they just went around. And the kid looked at me in his layout plan, and he goes, how much closer do you think they're going to get? And I said, I don't know, but we're going to find out on this next pass. And they landed, and, you know, and when we shot, it was great. And his dad looked over at me and he goes, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen, because 90% of the people I've ever hunted with, you'd have never gotten past pass number 3. Those birds went around 7 times before you called the shot. And I go, yeah, it's, you know, we're going to get our chance to kill our birds, man. That's why I come. That gets me. I remember that. I remember that exact flock of birds out of thousands of flocks of birds I've been lucky enough to see. And I know that kid will never forget it, you know, and his dad certainly won't. So.
Yeah, because the ideology behind it is if you want to shoot something and see it break, go shoot a clay target.
Right.
If you want to eat, go to the store and buy some beef or go to a farmer and get some beef. There's got to be more to that hunt than just seeing something die or providing for your family. And I like both parts of that. Sure. But it's the preparation, the community of a duck hunter. That's why I love Stuttgart. It's just I've talked about it. Just it's crazy, the community of a duck hunter. You don't find that in very many places, if anywhere in the country.
Not for a whole town.
Yeah, not for a whole town. But what you're explaining is why I hunt, and what gets me going, and what I look forward to is that you can go to a clay target sporting clay course and shoot and be happy, like, oh my God, I just shot a 77 out of 100. I could go to a restaurant and eat a piece of beef, and I'm like, that's the best meal I've ever had. And you can going and shooting a duck is cool, and seeing it die is cool, but it's sad. To me, I get emotional because you're taking something's life. So there is a responsibility there. And if you're not emotional about it, then you shouldn't be hunting, in my opinion. There is something sad of seeing a bird die.
Sure.
That's why we film on a lot of this high speed now, and you get to see them die in slow motion. You very, very rarely see it on our show to where a bird gets crushed in slow motion and then falls all the way to the ground. I'm just like, really?
Yeah.
What in the freak are you trying to show there? And I'm not to each its own, but I'm more into it of what happens when I see you in the parking lot at the wagon wheel. That's what I'm into. Like when we hug each other and hey, duck tacos, boom,
right.
Cornhole, cold beer, cocktail, stories, memories, dogs, family, JD, Katie, Chase coming up, Chance and Caden, my daughter Alyssa, my brothers Clinton Clay, your brother Alan, all the relationships that have been formed. We could literally sit here and go through our cell phones right now, Dave Stanley, and go down a list of people that we've met because of this lifestyle of hunting and fishing. And people are like, those guys are a-holes. No, we're not. We're not murderers, man. A lot of us are educated. A lot of us are very passionate about life and loving family members and raising our kids the right way. We've been brought up the right way because of hunting. We learned how to drive trucks, like you said, and wreck boats in duck marshes because of hunting. You know what I'm saying? Hunting is so much more. And we've been talking today for 2 hours and 10 minutes, and we're going to end it here in the next couple minutes, but we are going to do it again because I got you can see how long this list is and to hear you talk and how educated you are just from geography. It's like being around Keith Allen, just your stance on politics as far as knowing politics, your biology, science, the geography of the lay of the land and the rivers and the swans and where they frequent is you have a ton of knowledge to offer, but you're also at heart, you're still a kid of hunting. And there's still things about this sport. Like when you mentioned the smell of the Stillwater Marsh, there's nowhere else on earth that smells like it. And you could pick it out. Like I could pick out the smell of the front door of your cabin, or the smell I smell at the corrals, or when I'm in the timber at Prairie Wings in Arkansas, I go, that's Arkansas, that's Prairie Wings. Because that's what a hunter does. We were talking about it on the drives we make, and how we're always looking for wildlife, and it makes our drives so much more enjoyable. Yes, it could be unsafe. You got to be safe.
Yeah.
But hunters look for wildlife, and it's awesome. So
For sure.
I want you to come back. The way that you are, the way that you've lived your life is. I mean, I could go on and on. We haven't even gotten into your mentorship programs and your Green Wing stuff and the kids camps you do, and the amount of energy and sweat equity and elbow grease that you put into ensuring that next generation of hunters, conservationists, gatherers, fishermen, fishers. You do. We're going to talk about that. Let's just have a little bit of fun before you're a guitar player. You're a songwriter. You sit around my fire pit here. We've been around a lot of campfires and camp and duck camps. You and Clay playing the guitar. You write lyrics, and a lot of your inspiration comes from what we just discussed for the last 2 hours. And it's easier to do things in life with that passion and that vision of what hunting creates, in my opinion. I get up every day with this thirst of, I want to, like today I learned so much sitting with you, and I've known you 20 years, and I want everybody to understand what you know and what you've gained out of this career, not for them to say, oh, rah, look at Dave, whatever. I want them to be like, man, that guy gets
There's more to it.
There's more to it than pulling that trigger. And there's so many individuals that we met, and where I'm going with this is that from our days together in Stuttgart and watching the world duck and being around John, and being around Angie, and being around Jim Ronquest and Bobby Joe Willie, and what are your favorites? Who are your favorite people? Can you even pick them? Because it's like everybody was cut from this cloth when they became a duck hunter. And I often ask, like right now, who's the best duck caller that you know? Can't say John David.
Got to go past John David.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And John David's tough to beat.
Well, I've gotten to, you mentioned 3 or 4 of them right there. I've gotten to hunt with Keith Allen and Jim Ronquist and John Stevens and Bobby Joe Willie, and all of those would be on the list. I mean,
Trey Crawford.
They're amazing. Yeah, first time I ever hunted in Arkansas, I hunted with Trey Crawford. Just luck of the draw. Had no idea who he was. I told John David, and he goes, "Are you serious?"
And
I've known him since then. But it's more. It really, for me, it's the places, because the people come with the places. You and I used to go hauling those kids around to duck calling contest, and ourselves, to the contest that we did out on the coast there in Oregon. It was amazing, and the group of people that was involved with that. I mean, that's one of those things you just think of.
Stuart McCullough.
Yeah. The guys in California who did the same thing. We all had to, if you chase the duck calling thing like I did with my kids, and lots of people have done in the West, it's hard to do. You got a couple of chances, so you got to load up and go.
And you did that, and John David was evident of that. Katie won the world junior female for the women's duck.
You were standing right beside me when that happened.
Yeah, JD's won the world intermediate goose calling championship, and he's placed in the top 10 in the world goose and the world duck so many times.
So it's more the place. To answer your question, I have a lifetime of friends, and like you say, I'll be scrolling through thinking I'm looking for something in my phone, and I'll see a guy's name. It's a guy I haven't hunted with in 10 years, but I had a great time with him in a camp in Louisiana or what, and I'll just call him, and it'll be just like we were hunting together last week. It's that kind of fraternity, and the passion that people have, and you and your brothers are huge believers in this, and you carry the flag for it. I mean, the passion you have and your ability to share it with other people is what's going to make hunting continue in the U.S., because we are going to forever be, and it's just going to get worse, the political pressures, and, is this good, is it bad, is it whatever, and we need people whose lives are ultimately changed forever by it, and can express that to people so that they realize it's not, hey, I went out there and killed my limit in 6.5 minutes this morning, which I could care less about.
Yeah, I mean, when you would, you talk about people like we've mentioned the guys in Arkansas. Mr. Butch was a big part of that. Or you got
Butch Reichenbach, yeah.
Or you got Joe Lairs over in California, who's a genius when it comes to parts and his dental career and what he's done with his duck call company.
Brett Crow,
that's owned by Brett Crow now. That's an awesome duck caller.
Guy.
And a great man. And his dad's a great man. Just great people. And a lot of what we do in the off season, during the season, preseason is wrapped around that, what you just said, that passion. When we get together now, we get together a lot now because of our passion for the outdoors. And a lot of times our get-togethers are wrapped around wild game and fish and eating ducks and geese and elk and deer. And that's what I love about the heart of a hunter, is that we've already talked about what we're going to grill tonight. We've already talked about our plans for next duck season and things that could come up and what we're going to be doing together. We just got, a month ago, we're out on the marsh doing a photo shoot with the boats and watching ducks. And it's just like, if these antis and the people that say it's not good and I don't want my kids in it, they should at least give it a shot to see what it really brings. And what you explained and what we discussed today is what hunting really brings. And I understand there's a lot of different lifestyle. Tom loves to ski. People love to golf. You love to golf. You take Chase all the time. But to know what hunting does for a 7-year-old like Chase and what it does for our relationship, I think it's the strongest way and the strongest bond there is out there. I might be wrong. In my opinion, there's just no better friendship than a hunting friendship. And you talked about those guys that you can call up and it's been years since you talked to them. They answer the phone. Oh, you must have heard we got ducks. It's, they know what's up. They know what's getting ready to be talked about. And that's what I love about. So we are going to do it again, Dave. Everything that you do, from the guide and the fly fishing trips, Truckee River Outfitters, and what you do at the Reno Fly Shop, and the traditions that you've passed down, John David and Katie, and what you've instilled in them, what you're doing with Chase. You picked him up the other day and took him golfing. You've picked him up and took him fly fishing when Clay's busy. You come to the baseball games. You go to the camps. You teach kids gun safety and boat safety and calling instruction and duck identification. And then you're working with biologists here. You sat on the board for the Nevada Bighorns. You sat on the board for the Game Commission. I've always said it, and I'm always going to say it. And if people look up what a Renaissance man is, you're a Renaissance man of the outdoors. You can shoot a bow. You can shoot a rifle. You can shoot a shotgun. You can call a duck. You can call a turkey. Your son's the same way. Our family has benefited off of the friendship and the relationship because it's driven my passion. You were the first one to really nail down that blood in me of being a waterfowl hunter. And I thank you. I know if Clint and Clay were sitting right here, they would thank you. And the thing about it is that it's not over, because even when you're 80 and I'm 65 and we're sitting there watching Chase do his thing at the World Duck, and we're watching Alyssa catch her first fish on a fly rod, and it's going to happen way before that. She's already reeled in her first trout when John David hooked it. I don't even know if that's legal. Can a 7-year-old reel in?
Yes, they can.
So I thank you as a friend, and I'm glad you came by, but I really want you to come by again because I want to get into recipes. I want to get into more farming stuff that we've talked about. We started with John. We went to John Shaw. I want to learn more about what your thoughts are on, and I really want to get into the migration. And I wanted to get into it today about all the things that you get to do, and all the you still start in Canada every year and stay up there for a good 20, 25, 30 days. I want to get into that. And I want to talk about this passion of hunting more. And I want people to understand that there's stories out there. There's people living their lives out there that are benefiting people and animals in so many different ways. And it's not about that trigger.
That's right.
Yeah,
absolutely, man.
So I think right now it's almost 2:00, which, wow, I think you were later. We've talked for a long time. So you got two choices right now. We can either cook some duck or go eat sushi.
We can flip a coin on that. Either one's good.
All right, buddy. Thank you, Dave.
All right.
Appreciate
Thank you, pal. You bet.